Mom, wake up. I had no idea how long I'd been asleep. Someone suddenly shook my body, and I woke up. Forcing my heavy eyelids open, I saw my daughter, Michelle, kneeling on the bed, shaking me. Michelle, what's going on? It's still the middle of the night, right? The clock's hands pointed to 2 a.m. It was still far from morning. Despite my reluctance, Michelle pulled me out of bed. Hurry, just come with me. Michelle grabbed my hand and dragged me into the closet in the room. She quickly shut the door and peered out through the small gap, watching the room intently. I, too, frightened by Michelle's intense behavior, hesitated but eventually peeked through the gap with her. I almost screamed, but Michelle covered my mouth, stopping me. My body started to tremble, and I was glued to the terrifying scene unfolding before me. My name is Cynthia. I'm a 48-year-old housewife. I married my current husband, Scott, 5 years ago, and have been a housewife since then. Before getting married, I worked in a computer-related job, but opportunities to meet people were scarce, so I spent my 20s and 30s focused entirely on work. In the midst of that, I met Scott, who was working in sales for another company. We started dating after working together on a project. Scott, who seemed knowledgeable in so many things I was clueless about due to my work-focused life, taught me a lot. As our relationship deepened, I learned that Scott had a daughter from his late wife. Having had little experience with men until then, I was honestly taken aback by this revelation. Sensing my discomfort, Scott reassured me, saying, "You don't have to accept it if you don't want to." He continued the relationship, giving me the choice. Even though Scott was being considerate, I knew that the facts wouldn't change. As I wrestled with my feelings, wondering if I could continue seeing Scott, the day came when I finally met his daughter. The first time I met Scott's daughter, Michelle, she was 12 years old. She was in the midst of her sensitive middle school years. When Michelle first saw me, she didn't show any hostility, but she didn't seem to like me either. She just kept pretending to be indifferent. In reality, she probably didn't care about me at all. Her mother had passed away not too long ago, and maybe that was why she wouldn't warm up to me. She didn't even seem open to her own father, Scott. At that time, I was optimistic, thinking she must have a lot on her mind. Meeting Michelle somehow made me determined. The hurdle of marrying a man with a stepchild gradually disappeared. I have to make this child happy. I even developed that sweet resolve. When I shared my decision with Scott, he was happy, and soon after, he proposed to me. Of course, I accepted, and I became Scott's wife and Michelle's new mother. Not long after, I moved into the house where Scott and Michelle lived. I had visited many times before, but now it was going to be my home. Scott had bought this 2-story house soon after Michelle was born. It was an ordinary house, but spacious enough for the 3 of us. Once I started living there, I began to notice things that I hadn't paid attention to before when I was just visiting. It was the traces left by Scott's late wife. Even though I knew she had passed away, those traces still tormented me. The bathroom vanity was filled with her skincare products. The closet in the master bedroom still held a lot of her cosmetics. I'm not one to believe in the supernatural, but every time I saw her things, it felt like she was still present in this house. Scott seemed completely oblivious to it and didn't notice my discomfort at all. When I mentioned the leftover items, he casually said, "If they bother you, just throw them away." Even with his permission, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Removing all those traces would have felt wrong, especially to Michelle, who had lost her mother. So, despite my discomfort, I decided to leave everything as it was. As our new life began, there was another thing that started to bother me. It was Scott's attitude toward both Michelle and me. Before we got married, I didn't notice it, but Scott seemed to have a grudge against Michelle. I don't know why, but it was clear that Scott's feelings were evident in his behavior. On top of that, even though he had been so kind before we got married, his attitude towards me had also changed. He didn't openly criticize or insult me, but it was obvious that his passion for me had faded. Scott claimed his job was demanding, and he rarely came home during the week, often returning after midnight. Sometimes, he even stayed overnight at the office. Before our marriage, we would go on dates even during weekdays, or he'd spend time with Michelle at home. But that changed once we tied the knot. It was hard not to see that Scott was pushing Michelle onto me. I didn't know the full story, but it seemed he didn't have a favorable view of his late wife. Because of that, he seemed to harbor resentment even toward Michelle, his own daughter. Was I just a convenient housekeeper, someone to take care of Michelle for him? Does Scott even love me? Even though Michelle and I were spending more time together, she still wouldn't open up to me. She never argued or disobeyed me, but there was always a distance between us. I knew that just because she had a new mother, she couldn't be expected to accept it so easily. But I also knew this situation wasn't good for either of us. And Scott's attitude worried me too. Without a chance to enjoy our newlywed life, my mind became filled with anxiety. Despite these worries, I continued with my daily routines. I woke up at 5 a.m. every day, prepared Michelle's lunchbox, and made breakfast for her and Scott before sending them off. After that, I did the laundry and cleaned the house. I'd have leftovers from the night before for lunch, then went grocery shopping and prepared dinner. With such a hectic schedule, I had no time to confront my anxieties. I didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but as I continued living like that, 5 years went by. Michelle had turned 18 and was now a high school senior preparing for college entrance exams. Even in this situation, Scott didn't seem to care about her, leaving tasks like parent-teacher meetings up to me. Michelle still hadn't fully opened up to me, but we communicated more than before. She would say thank you when I made her lunchbox, and sometimes she would even help me with chores. We didn't exchange many words, but for me, that was enough. It felt like the right distance for us, one where we both felt comfortable. One day, Michelle suddenly said, "I threw away Mom's skincare products in the bathroom. I'll also clear out the closet. Is it okay if I go in?" When she referred to her as Mom, I could sense that Michelle was being considerate of me. I wondered how she knew about the items in the closet. Despite my slight suspicion, I decided it was a good opportunity to ask Michelle to take care of them. "Thank you for being thoughtful, but you don't have to do it if it's too hard." I tried to speak kindly, but Michelle quickly dismissed my concern. "It's fine. These things should have been dealt with a long time ago." With that, she started packing the closet items into trash bags. I felt a mix of emotions, but it seemed that this was an important step for Michelle to find closure. I accepted it and thanked her sincerely. Not long after, I encountered another hurdle. I found out that Scott was having an affair. The way I discovered it was quite common. I realized I was out of an ingredient needed for Michelle's lunchbox, so I rushed to the supermarket just before closing time. After buying the ingredient, I hurried home, only to notice Scott walking ahead of me. He had a young woman by his side. At first, I thought she might be a coworker, but their body language was not that of colleagues. It was clear they were romantically involved. My intuition confirmed it. I followed them discreetly, trying not to be noticed. As expected, they headed to a hotel. Of course, I felt anger and was deeply shocked by what I saw. But the truth is, a part of me had already been resigned to this possibility. That figures. That was my honest feeling. Scott had been pushing Michelle onto me, using his time to be with another woman. He hadn't divorced me because he needed someone to look after Michelle. To Scott, I was nothing more than a housekeeper. Feeling devastated, I returned home and started thinking about the future. What kind of future awaited Michelle and me? Should I tell Michelle the truth about what I had seen? But even if I did, there was nothing she, as a minor, could do about it. It would only hurt her. So I decided to keep quiet and let Scott's behavior continue unchecked. I convinced myself this was the best option for both Michelle and me. I had thought of Michelle as a burden pushed onto me by Scott, but the truth was, I liked her. Now I felt ashamed for even thinking that way. After calming down, guilt started to weigh on me. Morning came, and I hadn't slept a wink. I started preparing Michelle's lunchbox as usual. It seemed Scott still hadn't come home. The excuse about staying at the office was a lie. He was probably still at the hotel with that woman. As these gloomy thoughts swirled in my mind, I continued to cook efficiently. Then, an hour earlier than usual, Michelle came down the stairs. Good morning. I quickly plated the leftovers from the lunch preparation and set them at her spot. Sorry, was today an early day for you? When I asked, Michelle shook her head. No, it's fine. I just have somewhere to go. And by the way, I think Dad will be home tonight, she said, while steadily eating the breakfast I prepared. After finishing, she put her hands together and said, "Thanks for the meal," then headed for the front door. "Here's your lunchbox." I handed it to her, and she looked me in the eye and said, "Thank you. I know everything, so it's okay." With that, she hurried out the door. I know everything. What did she mean by that? Given the timing, it must be about Scott's affair. But how did she know? Had she already noticed and kept quiet for my sake, just as I tried to hide the truth from her? Had she done the same for me? Michelle didn't say more, but I felt certain that was the case. What a wonderful daughter she had grown up to be. Despite everything that had happened, my heart felt strangely full. But where was Michelle going so early in the morning? Could she be planning to confront Scott? Michelle is a smart girl, so I doubted she'd do anything reckless, but I'm still worried. All day, I anxiously waited for her to return. In the evening, Michelle came home as if nothing had happened. I chose not to bring up the morning's events and acted as usual. Then, just after we finished dinner, something unexpected happened. I'm home. Just as Michelle had said. Scott returned, and he was home surprisingly early. I already ate out. Scott glanced at both of us and quickly headed to the bathroom. I exchanged a puzzled look with Michelle, and she gave me a knowing nod. I'm exhausted, so I'm going to bed early. Scott emerged from the bathroom and went straight to the bedroom. I softly said good night and watched Scott as he walked away. He had never come home this early before, so I couldn't help but wonder what had happened. There were so many things I wanted to ask, but Michelle's eyes pleaded with me not to. Michelle and I cleared the dinner table as usual and took turns heading to the bathroom. I felt like something was going to happen, but I didn't know what. With an eerie sense of unease in my chest, I entered the bedroom where Scott was sleeping. What is this? The moment I opened the door, a foul air seemed to seep out. It was hard to describe, but it was a smell that felt almost fishy. Despite it being spring, the room's temperature was unnaturally cold, almost freezing. It wasn't my imagination. My body was shivering uncontrollably. When I looked over at Scott, he seemed completely unaware of the strange atmosphere, snoring away. Maybe he didn't notice because we hadn't slept together for a while. Although I felt some resistance to getting into bed with him, I couldn't stand the cold and crawled under the covers. The airy feeling persisted, but for some reason, a wave of intense drowsiness washed over me as soon as I got under the blanket. What is going on? I normally don't fall asleep quickly, and it was much earlier than my usual bedtime. Yet, I was overcome by such heavy drowsiness that it was hard to stay awake. Unable to fight the weight pulling on my eyelids, I eventually fell asleep. Mom, wake up. How much time had passed since I had fallen asleep? Someone suddenly shook my body, and I woke up. Forcing my heavy eyes open, I saw Michelle kneeling on the bed, shaking me urgently. Michelle, what's going on? It's still the middle of the night, isn't it? I couldn't understand the situation, and, still groggy, glanced at the clock on the nightstand. The hands pointed to 2 a.m. It was still far from morning. Despite my reluctance, Michelle pulled me out of bed. Hurry, just come with me. Michelle grabbed my hand and dragged me into the closet in the room. Not knowing what was going on, I found myself in the closet with Michelle, just the two of us. It's so late. As I tried to speak, Michelle placed a hand over my mouth. About 5 minutes passed since we entered the closet, and then we started hearing noises from the room. Michelle carefully opened the closet door just a crack to look outside. The dim light from the room illuminated her face, revealing her expression for the first time. Her eyes were wide open, and fear was etched on her face. As my mind finally cleared, I gently placed my hand on Michelle's shoulder from behind. She flinched, as if snapping back to her senses, and turned to look at me. She slowly then pointed at the gap in the door. It seems like she is saying to check the outside. Terrified by Michelle's reaction, I hesitated but eventually peeked through the gap. I almost screamed, but Michelle quickly covered my mouth again. My body started trembling as I was glued to the terrifying scene in the room. From the gap, I could see the bed where we had been sleeping. Scott was still there, lying as before, but there was a woman standing next to him. Normally, I would have assumed it was his affair partner, but the moment I saw her, I knew that woman was not alive. Something deep inside me screamed a warning. The woman's long, black hair hung down as she stared down at the sleeping Scott. Michelle didn't say a word, but I could tell that she was Scott's late wife. If I listened carefully, I could hear her whispering something into Scott's ear. I couldn't make out the words, but every time she spoke, Scott's body twitched violently. The scene repeated over and over, but neither Michelle or I could move. Eventually, daylight started to filter into the room. Dawn was breaking. As the light grew, the figure of Scott's late wife slowly became faint, harder to see. When she finally disappeared completely, I was able to move again. Michelle and I quickly rushed out of the closet and left the room. We went downstairs to the living room, collapsing onto the sofa. I noticed my pajamas were drenched in sweat. Next to me, Michelle's thin t-shirt was soaked as well. We sat there in silence for a while, both of us in shock, until Michelle finally spoke. You saw her too, right? She was angry. Michelle struggled to get the words out. Did she come to protect me? I asked, and Michelle slowly nodded. Mom's angry at Dad. He abandoned her when she was sick for another woman. Michelle continued, explaining that her mother held a grudge against me too. And who could blame her? Because that other woman was me. Scott had indeed told me that he was previously married, and that his wife had passed away. But he never mentioned she was still alive when we met. I had been deceived from the very beginning. Back then, I was probably nothing more than a fling to him. He must have used me for his convenience, planning to have me take care of his daughter. It's only natural that I'm resented, even if I didn't know. I was the woman who stole her husband while she suffered from illness. But this morning, I went to Mom's grave and asked her, seeing my face pale and my mood sink. Michelle said those words to me. There was a reason her mother had appeared like that. Today was her mother's death anniversary. Michelle had visited her mother's grave and told her about me. Michelle seemed to possess a strange ability inherited from her mother. Her mother had also had such a gift when she was alive and often saw spirits. Recently, Michelle had been clearing out her mother's belongings to minimize any harm to me. As the anniversary got closer, Mom's presence became stronger. I also hate Dad, but I don't blame you, Mom. You were a victim, deceived by him. The reason Scott came home yesterday was also because of her mother's influence. There's a mysterious force I can't understand that brought Scott back to the house. Though he hadn't yet woken up, Michelle assured me that Scott would not escape the consequences. Dad will be taken away, too. Her words sent a shiver down my spine, but Michelle quickly corrected herself. Not completely, just his spirit. At the time, I didn't fully understand what she meant, but her calm demeanor reassured me that it wouldn't be the worst-case scenario. We talked for so long that Michelle had completely forgotten about going to school. In such a situation, studying was the last thing on anyone's mind. I checked a clock. It was 8:30 a.m. It was about time for Scott to get ready for work as well. I hesitated, wondering if I should wake him up, when I heard the loud stomping of Scott coming down the stairs. Whether it was from grogginess or the events of last night, I couldn't tell, but something was clearly off. Scott, with vacant eyes, sat down at his usual spot in the kitchen. Dad, don't you have anything to say? Mom came last night, didn't she? Michelle got up from the sofa and walked over to Scott. Hearing Michelle's words, a spark of life briefly returned to Scott's eyes, but it quickly turned into a look of madness as he shoved his chair back and stood up. What are you talking about? He was clearly shaken by the mention of Mom. That single word jolted through him, momentarily snapping him back to reality before fear took over again. At first, I thought about helping you, Dad. But you're still cheating, and you haven't changed at all. You don't care about Mom, and you don't even feel guilty toward her. Accused by his own daughter, Scott became even more enraged. Everything Michelle said was true. You're disrespecting your father. Scott lunged toward Michelle, but I quickly stepped in between them. The next moment, my hand slapped Scott's cheek. Enough. Stop making things worse for us, I shouted as I struck him. His eyes flashed with anger for a moment but quickly faded. He couldn't believe I had hit him, and with just those words, Scott's expression showed he was more hurt than I expected. Everything you've done, your daughter has known all along. You might have thought you were clever, fooling us, but she knew everything. She knew how you abandoned your sick wife for another woman. I revealed everything Michelle had told me. The pain Michelle endured as she listened to her own mother's dying words, watching her pass away. The suffering she went through living with the man who had abandoned them, and the confusion of being raised by the woman who had taken her mother's place. Michelle had carried all of this on her own. Shame on you. It's unbelievable that someone as small as you could be her father. Now that I know everything, things can't stay as they are. Tears began to flow as I thought of all that Michelle had endured alone. Stop lying. I never abandoned her. It's not my fault. Scott, pale as a ghost, still refused to accept responsibility for his actions. But the fact he was so rattled showed his guilty conscience. Who's the liar here? You cheated on your sick wife while being married to me, and now you have the nerve to say it's not your fault. It's pathetic. Looking at Scott, who was panicking, made me feel sick. Mom's been angry all along. Every night, She cursed you from the bed. I don't even see you as my father anymore, so I asked her to take you," Michelle whispered quietly, and Scott's face turned even paler. The memory of last night must have flashed through his mind, and fear consumed him again. "It's too late to apologize now. I'll explain everything to your mistress and your workplace, so don't worry about that. It's over." Suddenly, those words spilled out of my mouth. Even though the sun had risen, the room grew dark, the lights had gone out, and a warm breeze began to blow. The foul smell from last night returned, filling the room. "She's here. Mom's here," Michelle whispered, but unlike last night, I couldn't see Scott's late wife. It seemed Michelle couldn't see her either. Only Scott's eyes were fixed on a single point, wide with terror. She was standing there, just as he saw her. "No, no, I didn't abandon you. It's her. She tricked me." Scott collapsed to the floor, pointing at me and shouting. He was trying to claim that I had known about his wife and had still pursued him. It was a complete lie. "Please, forgive me. Blame her. Take her instead." Scott continued to cry out, desperately pleading to the unseen figure of his late wife. I noticed that Scott had wet himself. "Cynthia, please. I love you." Scott, with a pitiful voice, clung to me. I instinctively slapped his hand away. "Don't touch me. I don't love you. Not even a little bit." Scott's desperate cries persisted, but his gaze gradually shifted. The distance between him and his late wife was closing. "Goodbye, Dad," Michelle said. And the next moment, a gust of foul-smelling wind swept through the room. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, but when I opened them again, everything had returned to normal. Except for Scott. The room was bright once more, but Scott remained collapsed on the floor, staring vacantly into space. Eck. His mouth hung open, drool dripping down. Scott muttered incoherently, as if he couldn't see us at all. "Mom took his soul with her," Michelle said quietly as she looked at her broken father. It was over. Her mother would never appear in this house again. Even if I didn't understand everything, that much was clear. The oppressive atmosphere that had loomed over the house was completely gone, and a fresh breeze seemed to flow through. "Michelle, thank you, even though it was my fault that your mom met such an end," I said, hugging Michelle. "It's all Dad's fault. You're not to blame. And my mom understands that now," Michelle whispered in my arms, gently rubbing my back. Leaving Scott in his state, we embraced each other for a long time. Afterward, I called an ambulance to take Scott to the hospital. Seeing that he was still unable to communicate, the doctor was visibly shocked. The doctor's assessment was that there is no chance of recovery. "Did he experience any sudden shock?" "This is not normal," the doctor asked. But of course, I couldn't tell the truth, so I avoided answering. Sensing my reluctance, the doctor didn't press further. "I've been a doctor for a long time, and sometimes you encounter unexplainable things. There might be something supernatural at play that we simply don't understand." When discussing Scott's future, I decided to have him admitted to a nearby mental hospital, as I had no intention of caring for him. Even though it was called an admission, Scott would likely never leave. After completing all the necessary paperwork, I returned home to report the outcome to Michelle. Michelle did not oppose my decision in any way. "I think that's for the best. I don't want to see him anymore, and I have no intention of taking care of him. I want you to live your life, Mom," Michelle said with a hint of sadness. She believed that as long as she stayed, I would remain tied to this place. "No matter what happens, I'll always be with you, Michelle. Even with Scott gone, nothing will change between us." I had come to love Michelle deeply, and I knew that feeling would never change. Michelle, still a minor, was only pretending to be strong. Deep down, she didn't want to be alone. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Thank you," over and over. A new chapter in life began for Michelle and me. At Michelle's request, we decided to leave the house where she had lived with her father and her late mother. Staying there would only bring back painful memories. We rented a small apartment, far from luxurious, and started our life anew. Michelle got into the university she had always hoped for and began her life as a college student. As for me, I went back to work, supporting Michelle's life just like before. With a job that allowed me to work from home using my computer, I was able to spend more time with Michelle. Though I had gone back to work, Scott's savings and his insurance covered much of our needs. Scott had been saving money, planning to build a home with his mistress elsewhere. Since I remained married to Scott for Michelle's sake, the money naturally came to me. I planned to use that money for Michelle's future, so I chose to earn my own income as well. Although I returned to the workforce, I didn't feel that life had become any harder. Starting to work again gave me a renewed sense of purpose. My relationship with Michelle has deepened even more than before, and the indifference from the past now feels like a distant memory. Mom, remember, you promised we'd go to the movies tomorrow, right? Don't forget. Now we often go out together. And Michelle's demeanor has become much brighter. Even if I hadn't known the truth back then, I had taken away the life Michelle and her mother had. But they forgave me, and they gave me this chance to experience happiness. Grateful for this miraculous life, I am determined to protect my daughter, Michelle, moving forward. No matter what challenges lie ahead, I know we can overcome them together. Seeing Michelle's smile, I am certain of it.
I work at a big company, you know. I can work enough for both of us, so no worries. Kenneth had said that during our engagement, but as soon as we got married, he changed his tune. He and Matthew would hurl insults at me daily. On top of that, he managed the money himself and skimped on living expenses. He'd complain non-stop, even though he let me do the cooking. Fed up, I declared divorce to Kenneth and left the house. Later, I bumped into Matthew by chance. "Hey. Heard you're getting TANF now." I was surprised. "Huh? You must be mistaking me for someone else. Don't put on airs." Matthew smirked. "Listen, we're estranged, okay? Don't come crying to me about having no money. I won't lend you a dime. Remember that." As I opened my mouth to retort, he had already disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, feeling the stares of passers-by, my shoulders shaking. I couldn't suppress my laughter. Poor thing, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he learns the truth. I'm Hannah, a 50-year-old housewife. I married Kenneth 5 years ago. When we met, Kenneth was the picture of a fine young man. We met at a gathering of acquaintances, and I found him fun to talk to and very friendly. As we parted, he said, "I want to meet just the two of us next time." Feeling sad about saying goodbye, I agreed. When we started dating, he mentioned having a son named Matthew with his ex-wife, who was then in 5th grade. We dined together a few times. He was a bright and pleasant boy, just like his dad. A year later, on the night Kenneth proposed, I took a leap and opened up. "You know I live with my parents while working part-time, right? The company I joined right after graduating was a black company, and it wrecked my health. Is that so? It was tough to quit too. I think long hours will be difficult for me in the future." Then Kenneth smiled kindly. "Don't worry about it. Just stay at home. Look, I work at a big company. I can work enough for both of us." Relieved by his words, I accepted his proposal. I was glad to have met a good man and believed we were starting a happy married life. I never imagined tasting despair in less than half a year. As we got used to living as a family of 3, Kenneth and Matthew's attitudes changed drastically. They started ridiculing my actions and words in a light tone. "Mom, are you bedridden again? Where's my sandwich?" Matthew frowned discontentedly as he came to the bedroom before school. I had participated in weeding at a nearby park yesterday and fell ill. It was an unusually hot day, and I had felt unwell since the day before. I had asked Kenneth, but he refused with an irritated look. Being a housewife must be nice. Slacking off all year. I need my days off, you know. Let me rest. Okay. Unable to get up the next morning due to pushing myself, I apologized to Matthew. Sorry, Matthew. I couldn't prepare your sandwich, so buy one at the grocery store. Handing him money, Matthew grumbled. Mom, can't you at least make a sandwich? You always take shortcuts with frozen food or leftovers. You're failing as a mom if you can't even cook. His words stung. Don't blame Mom, Matthew. Kenneth joined in with a half smile as he passed the hallway. Since you skimped on the sandwich, tonight's dinner must be lavish. Oh, is that so? Then I'll look forward to it. Being a housewife, you should have plenty of time for dinner, right? You're not sleeping until the evening, are you? Make sure to clean thoroughly without slacking. The two of them nonchalantly laughed at my poor condition, dropping their insensitive lines before leaving. As if I could prepare a lavish meal. Lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, I let out a heavy sigh. Because Kenneth is an extreme penny pincher. Despite being a section chief at a big company and earning a high salary, the living expenses he gave me were ridiculously low. It's my salary, so why should my wife manage it? After we married, Kenneth insisted on this and I, not opposing, meekly followed. I believed it didn't matter who managed the finances as long as it was done properly. Then Kenneth got carried away and started spending money as he pleased. It's necessary for work. Drinking expenses are business expenses. It's essential. Using such reasons as an excuse, he would buy expensive clothes and watches for himself, but make a sour face even when I bought cheap snacks. Since he insisted that a housewife doesn't need an allowance, I had to report to Kenneth and get permission to spend money whenever I went to the hair salon or bought clothes. One pair of jeans is enough, isn't it? You're buying more? I want a warm pair for winter. Fine. But buy them at a cheap store. I also want to get a haircut. Can I go to the hair salon once every 2 months to maintain my hairstyle? Huh? What's the point of you trying to be fashionable? If you keep your hair long, you only need to cut it once every 6 months. I won't allow haircuts. That's why I'm only allowed to buy cheap makeup from drugstores. I want to switch to something better because it's rough on my skin. But he won't listen. Moreover, the living expenses he gives are a third of the average. With this budget, our nutrition will be unbalanced. I lamented, to which Kenneth responded with a raised chin. On that TV saving show, they managed to live on this amount. They had a farmer-in-law providing vegetables and bread. It's impossible with these high prices. That's your job to manage. I was distressed by the thriftiness in living expenses, but what I couldn't stomach was about the wreath for Dad's funeral. When Dad, who had been ill, passed away and it was time to send a wreath, Kenneth visibly grimaced. We don't need to send a wreath for the funeral, right? Anyone attending the funeral, other than the chief mourner, should send one. Really? Then use your savings. It's none of my business. He said this to me as I prepared for the funeral with tears in my eyes. His utter lack of concern infuriated me. I never planned to ask you for it, so don't worry. Good. But do Matthew and I really have to go? Our long weekend will be ruined, and I hate that. Right, Dad? I had plans to play a new game. Although they grumbled, I never doubted they would come. However, Kenneth and Matthew arrived late, barely greeted my mom and relatives, and left swiftly. My exhausted mom didn't seem to have the energy to blame them, but my relatives were furious. What's the meaning of this, Kenneth? Your wife's father died, and you're too cold. Matthew, you've received so many gifts and allowances from Hannah's dad. While I apologized to my relatives, I felt my love for the two of them rapidly cooling. Kenneth, always in stylish suits with a refreshing aura, and Matthew, attending a prestigious university. Well regarded as a handsome father and son in the neighborhood, they only hurled insults at me at home. They wouldn't come straight home after work or school, wandering around, and returning with lipstick and perfume scents. Despite doing as they pleased, they treated me like a housekeeper, demanding lavish meals with a meager food budget. Lately, when I served dishes with chicken or pork, both would glare at me with disdain and hurl insults. Don't you want to serve your husband good food after he returns from work? If I get sick from eating this poor food, how will you take responsibility? Are you even a mom? I can make delicious meals even with chicken or pork. Besides, disliking vegetables and fish. You'll get sick with such a picky diet. I'm saying I'd eat if it were high quality. Don't complain when you can't satisfy us. I don't need advice from someone as frail as you. They used to eat while complaining, but lately they just leave the food untouched. Yet, if I don't cook, are you slacking off even though you're a wife? They would yell. I eat the leftovers for breakfast or lunch the next day, but tears well up, wondering for whom I'm cooking. As for their meals, they subsist on store-bought sandwiches, instant ramen, and snack foods. Eventually, Kenneth was diagnosed as pre-diabetic in a company health check, and Matthew started gaining weight. It was an inevitable outcome. Then they lashed out at me. What kind of wife makes her husband and child sick? We don't need a useless person like you. We're getting a divorce. Then I'll leave. They were surprised when I agreed easily. Are you sure? You're unemployed. You've been living off me. How will you survive now? Don't worry about me. I'll send the divorce papers for you to sign later. Please leave my stuff until the movers come to pick it up. Nobody's going to take your stuff. Kenneth sneered. You'll definitely regret divorcing a high-earning, handsome guy like me. A kind husband who lets you be a housewife with 3 meals and naps. There's no one else like that in the world, right? That's right. You've been living in luxury on Dad's money till now. You'll struggle from here on. While I packed clothes into my suitcase, Kenneth and Matthew kept talking endlessly behind me. Honestly, I envy Kenneth's ability to overestimate himself so much. When we were dating, I saw this part of him as confident and shining. You'll just go back to your parents, right? Say hi to your pensioner mom for me. You too will be heading straight to poverty. Matthew, I bet they'll end up on TANF soon. Matthew laughed at Kenneth's prediction. They already reek of poverty, but with Grandma, it'll be the ultimate. The funeral the other day was nothing special. It smelled like poverty. I thought so too. Like a poor family's funeral. I want a lavish one, Matthew. Got it, Dad. But for Dad, who works at a big company, and me, attending a prestigious university, poverty is a different world. Their endless comments infuriated me, but realizing it was pointless to respond, I let it all go. After returning home and explaining everything to Mom, she lowered her voice. At the funeral, seeing Kenneth and Matthew, I felt something wasn't right. But I thought it's not good to interfere too much in my daughter's household and kept silent. I was too preoccupied with Dad's care. I'm sorry for barging in like this. It's okay. I've been lonely without you. Why don't you stay here? Thanks, but once I get my job on track, I plan to move to an apartment. Mom's concern was comforting, but living with her might make me too dependent. Living nearby and visiting occasionally would be the right balance. Yes, Kenneth and Matthew mocked me as unemployed, but in fact, I've been working from home. It all started with the budget recipes I posted on my blog. After receiving many positive comments, I boldly launched a cooking site and shared my recipes, which quickly gained readers and internet fame. Soon after, an editor from a major publisher approached me, and now, I'm gradually preparing to publish a cookbook. Thanks to this, I had no time to dwell on the divorce, and days flew by. One day, my phone rang insistently. I paused stirring the ingredients in the pan and answered the phone. Hello? Hey, what's this about a deposit for the divorce trial? I sighed, knowing it was about that. You and Matthew hurled endless abuse at me. Oh, I thought, never mind. Relief in his voice, Kenneth continued. I didn't cheat or anything, you know. What, did you record me and Matthew? Your memory alone won't cut it. I've noted everything in my diary. Try and claim it if you can. Really, poor people and their obsession with money, you reek of frugality. If you think you can get a deposit for the divorce trial, go ahead. After his outburst, Kenneth hung up. I finished cooking and visited a detective agency, requesting an investigation into Kenneth's background. Soon, his affair with a subordinate was uncovered. The day after sending the two-shot photos and investigation report to his company, Kenneth contacted me again. You spreading this at work is low. The angry manager reported it to the higher-ups, and now I'm fired. Oh, she was the manager's daughter, wasn't she? It's your fault for cheating, knowing they're strict about such matters. I continued, laughing. But you shouldn't have any trouble, right? With all the saving you did, you must have plenty of savings. Aren't you and Matthew living luxuriously? Matthew moved into a dormitory this spring because commuting was tough. Damn, I have prepaid dorm fees and apartment loans. My savings? Drained by that woman. She was two-timing me with a younger guy. Sounds tough for you. But it's none of my concern. Oh, and about the divorce trial deposit, I'll also take half the value of the apartment for distribution of property. When the invoice arrives, please transfer the full amount to my account. Kenneth was yelling on the other side, but I hung up without a care. One day, while returning from shopping in town, I bumped into Matthew. Dressed in his usual flashy fashion, with piercings all over his face and his attention-grabbing hairstyle, he was easy to spot from a distance. Seeing me, Matthew raised his hand in greeting. Hey, heard you're getting TANF. I looked puzzled. Huh? Who are you mistaking me for? Don't put on airs. Matthew said, smirking. It's obvious where an unemployed old lady like you would end up. If you had just obediently followed me and Dad, you'd still be living a comfortable life. It's pathetic, really. Angry, I couldn't help but retort. Receiving TANF is a citizen's right. Any one of us could need it someday due to illness or an accident. It's wrong to look down on that. Yeah, so you're saying you're receiving it too? Matthew said, dismissing me with a smirk and pointing his finger at me. Listen, you and I are estranged. Don't come crying to me for money. Remember that. As I opened my mouth to reply, He turned his back and disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, conscious of the stares of passers-by, shaking my shoulders. I couldn't help but laugh, it was just too ridiculous. Poor thing, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he finds out the truth. A few days later, I woke up and checked my phone to find an unbelievable number of missed calls from Matthew. Reluctantly, I called back, and Matthew shouted at me furiously. "You deceived me, old woman." "What are you talking about?" "I heard from a cousin. You got 3 high-rise apartments from Grandpa's inheritance and are living a carefree life. Hiding that and getting a divorce is cowardly. That's my personal asset. Why should I have to tell you or Kenneth? It's joint property. You should have done a distribution of property with Dad during the divorce. Unfortunately, it became mine after the divorce procedures. So I can't give it to Kenneth. Officially, I knew from Dad's will that it would be mine, but I delayed the procedures until after the divorce because I didn't want to share it with Kenneth." Then Matthew shouted in frustration. "A rich woman like you getting TANF? I'll report you to the authorities right now. Feel free. It's not me, but Kenneth who's receiving it." Matthew fell silent. "What? I told you last time, it's not me," I explained as if speaking to a child. "Honestly, even without the inheritance, I can live well. I have income from the cooking site and book sales I started in secret. But Kenneth, after spending all his money on his affair, had lots of payments piling up and was borrowing heavily. When his affair was discovered and he was fired, his income stopped." "Are you listening? Dad's on TANF? No way!" I pulled the phone away from my ear as Matthew screamed. Waiting for him to calm down, I continued. "You really didn't know anything. He's too proud to tell his son. According to relatives he begged money from, he's behind on his apartment rent, facing eviction, and now stays at home all day in an old apartment. If you're worried, why don't you contact him?" There was silence on the other side for a while. Then, Matthew said resentfully, "You're cold-hearted. After all Dad did for you, you have no intention of repaying the favor? If you have money, you should give some to Dad." "Why should I? Ever since our marriage, it's been nothing but unpleasant memories. I don't feel indebted," I stated coldly. "If you're so concerned, why don't you, his son, lend him money? You're working part-time, after all. I don't have savings. The part-time pay goes to, hanging out with friends and stuff." Matthew suddenly became evasive, and I smirked. "You've been living quite lavishly for a student. Borrowing money to hang out at clubs is not a good idea." "How do you know that?" "The other day in town, I saw you from across the street. After we parted, you met up with a girl at a club and entered a brand store arm in arm. Also, a club membership card was left at the house. And using my credit card for shopping without my permission is out of the question." Matthew stammered in response. "That's unfair. You got high-rise apartments from Grandpa. Why don't I or Dad get a share? This is discrimination." Yeah. The credit card bill will be sent soon. Make sure you pay it." Before I could finish, the call was disconnected. Sighing, I ended the call too. Just when I thought it was all over, a few months later, Kenneth and Matthew showed up at my parents' house without any notice. The doorbell rang incessantly, and when I answered, it was the two of them. Expecting they came to borrow money, I let them into the house to avoid causing a disturbance in the neighborhood. Kenneth and Matthew, who until recently were so stylish, now appeared drastically changed, wearing wrinkled shirts and dirty trousers, their eyes lifeless and gaunt. But they still had the energy to be sarcastic. Entering the living room, Kenneth looked around and sneered with a half-smile. Same old house, huh? Why not sell one of those high-rise apartments and rebuild this place? Do something nice for Mom, living miserably on her pension. This is Dad's house, and we like it this way. More importantly, when are you two planning to pay me back? You're past the deadline. Kenneth lifted his chin arrogantly and said, Hannah, I'll forgive you now. So let's remarry. What? You started a cooking site, right? If you manage the household perfectly, I'll even let you work. So come back. Such a generous dad, forgiving the wife who abandoned her husband and child. So, Mom, why not live with Dad again? Living with just two women must be insecure. Stunned, I was speechless. After a moment, intense anger welled up inside me. Don't joke with me. How much more do you plan to ridicule me? Furious, I yelled at the astonished Kenneth and Matthew. After treating me like nothing more than a housewife, hurling abuse, not providing proper living expenses, and then driving me out. Now you want me back just because you found out I inherited high-rise apartments? No way. What? You're going to abandon us? Rich people really are stingy. Knowing we're struggling with money and still demanding payment, you're heartless. You were poor yourself until recently. Don't get cocky. In the midst of the argument, Mom returned from shopping. Kenneth and Matthew immediately started buttering her up. Please lend us some money. We'll probably pay it back. Besides, isn't it unfair that only Hannah gets Grandpa's inheritance? Give me one of the high-rise apartments too. Hi, Grandma. Long time no see. How have you been? Grandma, please persuade Mom to remarry. Dad doesn't want to break up, but Mom is being stubborn. Mom, surprised at first, changed her expression upon hearing their lines. She placed her eco bag on the fridge's floor and let out a deep sigh. So shameless, both of you. Eh? What? I'm telling you to have some shame. Startled by Mom's sudden loud voice, Kenneth and Matthew were understandably confused. Mom, usually calm, scolded them sharply. I've heard everything about the divorce from Hannah. I can't believe you have the nerve to show up here. No. Hannah is exaggerating. You have to listen to our side too. That's right, Grandma. Mom is quite the liar. I remember well how you two behaved at my husband's funeral. Mom cut off Matthew's words and continued sternly. Arriving nonchalantly late to the funeral, not greeting me or the relatives, yawning through the service, and leaving before the coffin was sent off. And now you dare ask for his inheritance? Go back to sleep. She drove a taken aback Kenneth and Matthew to the front door and glared at them one last time. You two are now strangers to us. Don't come here again. If you do, I'll call the police. Mom threw their shoes out the door, forcing them to leave in their socks, and immediately locked the front door. Kenneth, who had been avoiding paying me, was advised by his lawyer that a lawsuit would cost even more. Reluctantly, he finally transferred the money to my account. Even though Kenneth was fired from his job, he couldn't find another one, and the in-laws, hearing about their son's situation from relatives, stepped in to cover his debts. They visited my parents' house and apologized profusely for Kenneth's troubles. Later, Kenneth, having given up on finding a new job, returned to the countryside under the guise of helping with the family's farming. However, the story of our divorce spread through the village, leading to both children and elders pointing and laughing at Kenneth. There's thrifty Uncle Kenneth. Even with a degree from a good university and a job at a big company, what's the use if your wife leaves you for being too arrogant? The reason for his divorce from his first wife was also his reckless spending. He'll never change. Being mocked by the villagers is embarrassing. Remarry me to show them. I kept receiving such persistent messages from Kenneth, so I deleted his contact. His mistress, apparently no longer interested after the money ran out, had long since left him. I found her with a detective's help and made sure she paid the divorce trial's security deposit. I also made Matthew reimburse for the card he used without permission. Though enrolled in a prestigious university and on track to become an elite like his father, Matthew started skipping classes and playing around, leading to failing grades and eventual expulsion. His friends and girlfriends were concerned, but Matthew, in his arrogance, alienated them with his prideful remarks. He then had a major argument with Kenneth, saying, "You're my son, yet you won't help repay the debt." Now, they're estranged. Matthew lives alone in a small apartment, making ends meet with part-time jobs. Gone are the days of buying whatever he wanted and enduring sarcastic remarks despite high earnings. For me, it's a refreshing change. With my cooking site taking off and a book deal finalized, I moved to the top floor of the high-rise apartment inherited from Dad. Mom is still healthy at 73. The high-rise is close to our family home, so it's convenient if anything happens to her. I'm planning a surprise hot spring trip for Mom's upcoming birthday. Though my marriage was a failure, I want to continue having a good relationship with Mom. Stop sitting around like you're sick and get to work. With that, my brother-in-law Anthony, who had drunk too much, hit me in the stomach even though I was pregnant, which should never have happened. This was during a visit to the in-laws' house. Ouch! Please stop! Not the stomach! I instinctively protected my stomach and glared at Anthony, hitting me while knowing I was pregnant. This is not something that can be forgiven just because he had been drinking. I had tolerated Anthony because he was part of Thomas's family, but I can no longer forgive this outrageous act. It was when I had made up my mind. "What are you doing?" My mother-in-law Rachel shouted in a voice I had never heard before. The next moment, the usually gentle expressions of the in-laws changed. "Discipline is needed." "What?" "Yes. Time for some re-education." My in-laws Rachel and Kevin said in a voice lower than usual, and I was surprised. "I am Sarah, 32 years old, married for 5 years. I work in the office of a major trading company. My husband, Thomas, is 2 years older than me and the ace of the sales department at the same company. So, it's a workplace romance." Thomas is the middle child of 3 siblings, with an older brother and a younger sister. I quickly became good friends with his sister, Samantha, because our names were similar. "Sarah and Samantha, you guys are like twins." We laughed at Thomas's words when I was first introduced. "I always wanted a sister since I have 2 brothers. Can I call you Sarah?" "Of course." "Nice to meet you, Samantha." We hit it off right away and have been close ever since the wedding. Samantha works for a foreign company and moved to Japan 2 years ago. Although I knew she could be transferred abroad, my mother-in-law Rachel seemed lonely when the orders came. I was lonely too, but in this era of video calls and the internet, it's not so bad. I showed Rachel how to video call and forwarded her photos from Samantha, which she was very happy about. "Thank you, Sarah. We don't really understand all this talk about Instagram accounts and stuff. It's truly a convenient era." Her company takes proper vacations, so she'll come back several times a year. Something to look forward to. Yes, indeed. Make sure you and Thomas come over then. Will do. The in-laws' house is just a 30-minute drive away, and we visited several times a month. Kevin is taciturn and Rachel loves to chat, seemingly opposites, but both are calm and kind, and our relationship with them is good. With Samantha around, Visiting the in-laws' house was not a burden but a pleasure. Except for one thorn in my side. My brother-in-law, Anthony. Anthony claims to be an illustrator and is always at home. He once worked at a design office years ago but quit, and now he only gets work occasionally. In reality, he's almost unemployed. In other words, he's living off his wealthy family, which honestly, as an adult, I find, well, it's not my place to say. Kevin and Rachel can afford it, and according to Thomas, Anthony was pampered because he was frail with asthma as a child. Anthony is a bit sensitive and has been weak since childhood, so he's always been at home. But he's kind, so please get along with him. Sure, of course. At the beginning of our marriage, Thomas told me this, and I genuinely agreed, interacting with Anthony normally. My first impression of Anthony, when I greeted him, wasn't bad. The painting at the entrance was done by Anthony, right? Wow, that's amazing. I'm totally not good with art, so I admire that. When I said this with a smile, Anthony looked at my face. Yes. That one hanging there, I painted it too. Oh, this animal painting. Wow, that's great. Thank you, Sarah. I've always been bad at art and craft, so I genuinely admire people who can draw. It was just that, but Anthony seemed very pleased with my words and talked to me about his paintings. Since then, whenever Thomas and I visited the in-laws' house, Anthony would join in the family time. It seemed normal to me, but apparently, Anthony often stayed in his room, so Kevin and Rachel were happy to see him enjoying himself. Sarah has brought a new breeze into our home. And she gets along with Samantha too. Please continue to be good to both siblings. Yes, I'm really happy to have a brother and sister since I'm an only child. Everyone smiled at my words, and I was genuinely happy to have joined such a wonderful family. Anthony became increasingly cheerful, and every time I visited, he showed me his paintings. However, during the summer of our second year of marriage, something happened when we visited the in-laws' house. Sarah, I have a new piece. Come see my painting. Ah, yes. What do you think of this new work? It's the sea, right? The gradation of blue is beautiful. I answered vaguely because I don't understand art, but Anthony's face lit up, and he grabbed my arm. You really get my work the best. Sarah, you're my muse. Shall we draw together? I'll teach you. I was wearing a t-shirt and was surprised when he grabbed my bare arm. Did he just call me his muse? What? No, I'm not good at drawing. It's okay, I'll teach you. And we'll keep it a secret from Thomas. He said, coming closer and staring at me. No, 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 isn't this odd? What's the secret? No, thank you. I'm really not good at drawing. I'll be going back now, I said, maintaining a smile as best as I could, and then I ran back to the living room. Sarah. Mom's making tea. How was Anthony's illustration? Yeah. It was good. I replied to Thomas, trying to sound nonchalant, but my heart wouldn't calm down. I was shocked. Anthony seemed odd. Was that his way of showing interest? In me, his brother's wife? He always seemed happy when I praised his paintings, but I never thought. Anthony doesn't interact much with people outside because he's mostly drawing at home, so maybe his sense of personal space is a bit off. Sarah, do you want tea? Oh, what's wrong? No. Rachel, let me do it. Then could you make coffee for me? Yes. I calmed myself while smiling at Rachel, who was thanking me. It's not like he confessed his love or anything. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. He just invited me to draw, and maybe he got excited because I praised his work. It would be rude to Anthony Thomas, and even Kevin and Rachel if I misunderstood Anthony's intentions, and I don't want to cause trouble in our good relationship with the in-laws' house. I decided not to worry about it. But that night, I received a text from Anthony. Sorry about today. Thomas was there, you had to say no. Come by yourself next time. Huh? I read the message again. I didn't quite understand it. Not sure how to respond, I didn't reply. Honestly, I had forgotten about it. But a few days later, another text came. When will you come? I have a painting to show you. If you want to meet outside, I'm willing to go out. I'll take you to the art museum. How should I interpret this? It could be seen as a date invitation, but he's Thomas's brother. And he's somewhat of a recluse. It's good that he's willing to go outside, and Kevin and Rachel would be happy about it. I'm busy and can't go to the museum, but we'll visit the in-laws' house again with Thomas. Let's all have dinner together. I thought it was troublesome, but I couldn't just ignore it. I replied casually, emphasizing that I'm the wife of the brother. Anthony didn't reply to that, and I felt relieved. However, after that, Anthony's behavior towards me changed. He used to greet me warmly at the in-laws' house, engaging in conversations and showing me his paintings, but he started to ignore me completely. When we passed each other in the hallway or ended up alone, he glared and muttered, dishonest woman. Playing with men. I was startled and looked back, but he was already gone. Recently, Anthony has stopped talking to you altogether. He's been gloomy at home. Do you know anything? I was asked by Rachel while we were in the kitchen and felt a jolt. No, nothing in particular. I quickly smiled and brushed it off. Really? Just when he was starting to brighten up, he's going back into his gloomy phase. Anthony's sensitivity can be quite troublesome. Oh dear. I could only vaguely nod in response to Rachel's words. Meanwhile, I received texts from Anthony. The messages varied, from insulting words to wanting to meet just the two of us. Perhaps he's mentally unstable. I couldn't tell Thomas, so I didn't reply to avoid provoking Anthony any further. However, as the stress built up and it became harder to visit the in-laws' house, an event happened that made all of that seem insignificant. I was pregnant. Both Thomas and I had wanted children, but it had been difficult to conceive. We had undergone tests after turning 30 and found nothing abnormal, so we were just starting to consider treatments, making the news incredibly joyous. Thomas and I embraced each other happily. Fortunately, my morning sickness was mild, but considering the future, I informed my immediate supervisor and colleagues early on. Knowing how much I wanted a child, my colleagues were as happy for me as if it were their own good news. Completely forgetting about Anthony, I was engulfed in happiness. I told Thomas's sister Samantha through WhatsApp. Despite her overseas assignment, we kept in touch frequently, and Samantha was thrilled for us. Since I couldn't come back for Christmas because the flight tickets were too expensive, I'm planning to return on the next long holiday. I'll be able to stay for about a week, so let's take our time and catch up. I'm so happy you're coming back. Rachel and everyone will be delighted. We'll all be waiting. Then, on the holiday when Samantha was scheduled to return, Thomas and I visited the in-laws' house. Welcome. How are you feeling, Sarah? Come inside quickly, it's cold. I'll make some caffeine-free herbal tea. Thank you, I'll do it. No, sit down. The morning sickness has subsided, so I'm fine. But you're busy with work usually. Take it easy when you're here. That's right, Sarah, relax. Thank you. Kevin and Rachel were very happy about the pregnancy and looked forward to the grandchild's birth. I decided to bask in their kindness. Then Anthony walked in. It had been a while since we last saw each other.
Anthony. Samantha is on her way here from the airport. Long time no see, Anthony.
I greeted him normally, trying my best. Having been blessed with a child, I felt a strong, warm sentiment, thinking it was best to just get along as a family.
Yeah.
Anthony glanced at my stomach for a moment before heading to the kitchen where Rachel was.
Oh, Anthony. I'm making tea, but would you prefer coffee?
I'm having beer.
What? Oh, right. Let's toast to celebrate the grandchild's arrival.
Kevin said cheerfully.
You too? I was thinking of toasting in the evening, but well, okay.
Rachel said with a laugh, and the men toasted with beer while Rachel and I had herbal tea.
Do you know the baby's sex yet? No, not yet. We might find out at the next checkup. How exciting!
While talking with Rachel, I noticed Anthony from the corner of my eye. He was drinking with Thomas and Kevin, seemingly at a fast pace.
Anthony, aren't you drinking too much? Save some for the evening. Samantha is coming back too. Shut up! I want to drink. Hey, Sarah, bring some snacks. What?
Suddenly called out, I looked at Anthony with a puzzled face. I remembered Thomas mentioning that Anthony doesn't handle his alcohol well.
Hey Anthony, you're already drunk. Don't call her over.
Thomas chided with a wry smile and spoke to me.
Sarah, it's okay. We still have some snacks. Okay. Not good enough. Come on, bring them over. What kind of wife does nothing? Anthony, you know Sarah is pregnant. I told her to sit.
Rachel called out from the kitchen. Pregnant.
Ah, right.
Then Anthony suddenly stood up and approached me.
Messing around and then getting pregnant, huh? Whose child is it? Excuse me. What the hell?
Thomas and I exclaimed in unison. I was dumbfounded by Anthony's words. Unacceptable. Just as I was about to speak.
Anyway, since you're not sick, stop sitting around and get to work.
With that, Anthony, who was drunk, did the unthinkable and hit me in my pregnant belly.
Ouch! Please stop.
I instinctively protected my stomach and glared at Anthony.
Damn it! Thomas always getting all the good stuff. Ow, ow! Stop! Not the stomach! Anthony, what the hell are you doing?
Thomas rushed to stand in front of me in a panic. Despite my shock and fear at Anthony's sudden change, I felt a growing anger within me. Hitting me while knowing I was pregnant, and just because he had been drinking, was unforgivable. I had tolerated his actions and texts up until now because he was Thomas's important family member, but I could not forgive such an outrageous act. I didn't care if it ruined my relationship with Kevin and Rachel. It was at that moment I decided.
What are you doing? What?
A voice louder than I had ever heard before rang out. It was Rachel.
What did you just do to Sarah?
In the next moment, the usually gentle expressions of Kevin and Rachel changed.
Discipline is needed. What? Yes. Time for some re-education.
Rachel and Kevin said in a voice lower than usual, and I was surprised.
Rachel? Sarah, step back.
As Rachel pushed me behind Thomas, the next moment, there was a sharp smack.
Ow, ow. My hand hurts more.
The always graceful Rachel was in a tremendous rage. Indeed, her hand also looked painful. There was a really good sound. Anthony was holding his cheek,
looking stunned.
What are you doing? Mom, you always takes my side, right? Dad, too.
Kevin and Rachel sighed sadly.
As a child, you had severe asthma and couldn't do many things compared to your lively younger brother and sister, missing out on your youth. We felt sorry for you and spoiled you, but it was a mistake. What? That's right. We will not take care of you anymore. Leave this house, pay your own rent and living expenses. What? Why me? Why am I being kicked out? It should be this woman leaving. Sarah is our precious son's wife. Plus, our grandchild will be born soon. We want her to continue coming to this house without worry. You're the one who should leave. Rachel! Damn it! I'll sue. Punishment for the slut who played with my feelings. That's fraud.
Anthony was incoherent, beyond comprehension.
You'd be the one getting sued, Anthony.
A firm voice echoed.
What? Samantha! Samantha! I texted, I'm almost home, but no one replied to my WhatsApp. I come back to find this happening. I heard everything. Sarah, is your stomach okay?
Samantha, welcome back. Sorry we couldn't greet you properly.
That's not important.
Saying that, she glared at Anthony fiercely.
Remember I told you my boyfriend is a lawyer I met in Japan? What? Assaulting a pregnant woman is a crime. What?
Anthony's face turned pale.
Haha. What's the big deal? We're family. I was just drunk and fooling around. Fooling around! What if something happened to the baby in my stomach?
I raised my voice involuntarily. Samantha stepped in front of me protectively.
Family or not doesn't matter. Stalking and attempted assault are taken very seriously these days, so be prepared.
Samantha's clear statement, with the backing of her lawyer boyfriend, was very persuasive. Anthony was pale as a ghost. It might be hard to sue for just being hit a few times in the stomach, but it was enough to scare the naive Anthony.
Stalking? Don't lump me in with those people. Thought you could do whatever because Sarah wouldn't tell anyone, right? Sure, Sarah kept it to herself for Mom and Dad's sake. But she confided in me. What?
Anthony's face contorted.
I know everything you did, and all the texts are saved. Texts?
Thomas looked puzzled.
Sending texts to Sarah when Thomas was not around, starting with hitting on her and then turning to harassment when rejected. What?
Thomas and Kevin exclaimed in unison, and Rachel pressed her temples painfully.
I don't know if it was when you were drunk, but some of the content was pretty bad. I advised her to keep it as evidence. And to keep a diary with dates of when you harassed her, on advice from my lawyer boyfriend. No way! Do you realize how much stress and pain you've caused Sarah? No, that. I mean, it's because Sarah seduced me. Don't you dare call her name.
Thomas's voice changed. This time, the anger was real. And its intensity made even me flinch for a moment.
Anthony used to stay cooped up, but he seemed to enjoy talking with Sarah. I genuinely thought our family was growing and Anthony was getting better. What are you doing?
Then he turned to me and bowed his head.
Sarah, I'm sorry. It's my fault too for asking you to get along with Anthony. You couldn't talk about it, right?
Thomas said with regret, and Anthony, trembling, lashed out in frustration.
So, why is it always you?
Just because you're my younger brother doesn't mean you can be so arrogant. Always surrounded by friends, having girlfriends. Why can't you just let me have this woman? Sarah likes me, she approached me. What are you talking about?
I felt dizzy with anger. That's enough, Anthony.
Oh, you finally get it?
No. We're done. You're no longer a brother or family to me.
What?
Samantha, introduce me to your lawyer boyfriend.
Of course. What? Wait a minute.
Suddenly, Anthony started to panic.
It's clear from the texts that Anthony was the one who approached Sarah, and his actions were borderline stalking. But and hitting Sarah in the stomach while she's pregnant is absolutely unforgivable. It's a serious assault. I can't forgive that above all else,
Rachel said firmly. Facing the cold stares from the entire family, Anthony suddenly yelled at me.
What the hell? It's all your fault. What do you mean?
What now? Anger made my voice come out lower than usual. Anthony sighed dramatically before saying,
It's because you seduced me. After leading me on like that, to play around and then discard me, what a villainess. This villainess.
Everyone, not just me, was dumbfounded by Anthony's nonsensical accusation.
What are you talking about? I never once seduced you. Come on, don't pretend you've forgotten. You praised my paintings so much, saying you liked them and admired them. That was about your art. What? I only praised your art. I never said I liked you.
Anthony was shocked. Him being so surprised was shocking to me, considering it was all his own delusional thinking.
Always smiling and coming closer, saying my paintings are wonderful. And you were always looking forward to them. How is that seduction? I can't draw, so I simply thought your skill was amazing and expressed my admiration. And if my husband's brother says to look at his paintings, what else am I supposed to say? So that's...
Anthony was at a loss for words. That's exactly how I feel, wanting to be at a loss for words.
You're right, Sarah. Did you really misunderstand her praise as personal affection? Besides, Sarah is my wife.
Thomas's perfectly reasonable words made Anthony bite his lip in frustration.
Anthony, you left your last job because you were accused of misogyny and stalking by female staff, right? What?
It was the first time I heard about it.
The way they made a fuss was certainly extreme, and you always being sensitive became depressed. Our family believed you sighed and worried about you.
So that was the story. That would explain why they hadn't mentioned it to me.
Now I wonder if we were right to believe you as our son.
Kevin frowned sadly.
That's right. Sarah was trying to get along as family, and Anthony seemed brighter, so we were watching over him. And you were harboring such thoughts, approaching the wife of your brother.
Rachel was trembling with anger and shock. Supporting her shoulder, Kevin murmured in a low voice.
Leave. What? Just like Rachel said. Leave. We won't help you anymore. What? Wait. The occasional art jobs you got, Rachel and I pleaded on your behalf. We won't do it any longer. What? Wait a minute. Me too.
Thomas continued in a cold tone.
What? When there were projects with illustration work, I'd refer or recommend you, right? But not anymore. What? Wait. I'll even tell my contacts to avoid dealing with you. I'm sorry for having involved them with such a person. What's that supposed to mean? You always looking down on me.
Stop it!
I stepped in front of Thomas, who Anthony was about to grab, and glared at him with all my might. Sarah, stay back. I'm fine. My intensity made Anthony step back.
Thomas doesn't look down on you. He cared about you. So did Kevin and Rachel, right? A grown man, living under his parents' protection, never showing gratitude, only engaging in despicable behavior. How pitiful.
At my words, Anthony collapsed to his knees, groaning. And of course after that, Anthony was kicked out of the house with nothing but the clothes on his back. He tearfully agreed to a condition not to involve himself with me or the family, not to stalk or harass, in exchange for us not filing a report for the violence. Through Samantha's boyfriend's connections, we got a lawyer to draft a document which he signed. Anthony pleaded to be allowed to stay in the house, but Kevin and Rachel would not hear of it. Later, he attempted to find work in illustration through old connections, but due to the manner of his departure, no one would employ him. He ended up working at a construction site with lodging, but reportedly, due to his uselessness and high pride, he was often disciplined by the robust men and the young workers alike. He brought it all upon himself. It's good for him to learn the harshness of society firsthand. And 6 months later, in my arms now sleeps a beautiful daughter. This precious life that was safely brought into the world.
Is she asleep?
Yes.
She really does have the cutest sleeping face. I've prepared the baby bed in the other room. Shall we put her down? Mom's preparing some tea, so why don't you take a break while she naps?
Samantha smiled as she said this. Thanks. Hey, did you decide on the dress you were indecisive about? I want to hear about it.
Oh, yes. Want to see the photos?
I'd love to. Samantha, who has returned from abroad, is now preparing for her wedding with her lawyer fiancé. We continue to be as close as real sisters. With Anthony gone, visiting the in-laws' house has become a place of comfort, and Kevin and Rachel are overjoyed with the birth of their grandchild.
Sarah, I'll take her to the baby bed.
Thomas came over and gently lifted our daughter from my arms. Thomas, too, is utterly enamored with our long-awaited child, to the point where I worry he might become too soft of a father. Having something to protect has brought out a new strength in me. At the same time, I find myself feeling a renewed sense of gratitude towards my own parents and in-laws. As I raise this child, I realize I'm also being nurtured. In the realm of parenting, I'm starting from zero just like her. One cannot live alone. I want to remember this and be someone who values both themselves and those around them. As I watched my child's sleeping face, a smile naturally came to my face.
Taking care of Dad and Mom is all on you, my dear wife. If you oppose, I'll divorce you and sue for alimony, huh?
Could he really believe such an absurd demand would pass? I looked at Georgina, utterly exasperated. Alex stood there boldly, giving me a nasty smirk while looking at me. He must think I would accept his demand. Indeed, I've complied with the requests for the sake of the in-laws, believing it was the right thing to do. Regardless of Alex, I thought those two were good people. But now, having seen Brittany's true nature, I've lost all concern, let alone any sympathy. I smiled back at Alex. All right then. Let's get a divorce.
Don't come crying to me later. Talking back to your husband, what a failure of a wife. Good riddance. Choosing your job over Dad and Mom. Unbelievable.
Oh, my apologies for that.
Exactly. I'd prioritize Dad and Mom over my job any day. Unlike you, who's utterly heartless.
Alex boasted too proudly. Then why didn't he take time off work now? Instead of pushing it onto me,
He should just take a break and help out his parents. Blaming and pushing responsibilities onto me without lifting a finger, what a way to shift the blame. From now on, even if we see each other at work, don't you dare speak to me. I should have chosen a different company. Alex's parting words pushed me to my limit. Then you're fired. What? Fired? You're not my boss. What are you on about? Gone mad from the divorce shock? I couldn't help but reveal a truth Alex was unaware of. I'm Ren, 40 years old. I run an apparel company. I started this company at 26. Having lost my parents early, I motivated myself by setting goals and focusing on achieving them. Decades later, I've dedicated my life to stabilizing the business, working tirelessly. As my friends got married one by one, I didn't even have a boyfriend. There was no time to play. I traveled for work, both domestically and internationally. There were years I don't recall taking any time off. Surrounded by relatives and acquaintances, I was often met with veiled criticism disguised as concern. Aren't you going to run out of time to have children if you don't hurry up? Is work really that enjoyable for you? Don't you get lonely? Arguing back would only invite more nagging. So, I took to leaving those situations with a forced smile as quickly as possible. All the effort I poured into my life paid off, and the company's performance steadily improved. Finally, I could afford to take regular breaks and had the luxury to enjoy my personal life. By this time, I was already 38 years old. At this point, I wasn't particularly keen on marriage, but the idea of having a good partner was appealing. That's when I met my husband, Alex. Our meeting was sparked by a soccer game. Suggested by a subordinate, I went to watch a game on a whim and met Alex there, cheering for the same team, and we hit it off. After attending a few games together, we started going out, and then he asked me out. Alex was the same age as me, but seemed remarkably youthful. He had many hobbies, from baseball to video games, manga, and golf, dragging me along to all sorts of activities. Having never really had time to play before, my time with Alex was incredibly exciting and fun. Being my first boyfriend at 38, I was honestly quite thrilled. One day, Alex broached the subject. Would you meet my parents? If I'm going to marry someone, it's going to be Ren. That's why I want to properly introduce you to them. This was about 2 months into our relationship. Caught off guard, I couldn't refuse, always looking forward to the fun times with Alex. Things went smoothly, and a week later, we visited Alex's parents' house. Oh my! To be dating such a lovely person, my son is a lucky man. Indeed. What a wonderful young lady. And for Alex to introduce a girlfriend to us, that's a first. He must be really smitten. Warm and welcoming, Alex's parents showered me with compliments, leaving me flattered and embarrassed throughout the visit. Alex, sitting next to me, smugly commented, "Right? A catch at 38. Right? A catch at 38. Though crudely put, it seemed meant as a compliment in Alex's way. With such wonderful parents, I felt we could have a good relationship after marriage. I was relieved the meeting went well. However, I was slightly concerned that Alex referred to his parents as mom and dad. A calling I hadn't often heard from adult men in my circles, which initially surprised me. But considering the differences in each family, I decided not to dwell on it negatively. Alex seemed to have a good relationship with his parents, often praising his mother excessively. While endearing, some aspects felt off-putting at times. Like when the conversation turned to cooking. What kind of dishes do you excel at, Ren? I wouldn't say I excel, but I often cook Western-style meals. At this, Alex enthusiastically chimed in. Right. She makes steak a lot. They're edible, but when compared to Mom's cooking. Oh, that's a great idea. Why don't you teach her your recipes? I understood the comfort of familiar tastes. But his wording left me feeling complex. Unperturbed by my feelings, Alex's mother was delighted. Well then, I must compile a notebook for Alex's sake. She was enjoying herself. As we were about to leave, a shocking truth came to light. When are you two getting married? Asked by Alex's mother. Alex casually replied, causing me to be taken aback. I'd marry her right now if I could. It'd make life easier, especially since part-time work doesn't pay much. Part-time? Indeed, when I first met Alex and inquired about his job, he vaguely mentioned something like sales. I too had been vague about my job, saying only something in apparel, as we were still just getting to know each other. Everyone has things they'd rather not discuss. I figured we could talk about it more once we got a bit closer. I had completely forgotten about it, never imagining he was working part-time. Stunned, Alex explained with a frustrated look. What's with that face? Thinking even at 38? But, you see, there's a good reason for this. Turns out, Alex's mother has always been frail and prone to sickness. Then, 2 years ago, his father fell ill and needed care. Alex, who was working in sales at a steel company at the time, quit to take care of his father, switching to a more flexible part-time job. Mom alone would have a hard time, right? I just wanted to be there for my parents. I thought it'd be fine to stay part-time for that reason. Alex glanced at his parents and nodded. Recently, both Mom and Dad have been in good health, so I'm thinking of getting a full-time job again. I gotta work hard if I'm going to marry Ren. Hearing about the part-time work, I felt ashamed of my disappointment. Alex had simply prioritized his parents over his job. What a kind and warm person he is. And now, he's thinking of what's best for me. After our conversation, I thought for a moment and then made Alex an offer. If you're interested, why don't you apply to my company? Eh? Work at the same company as Ren? Yeah. It's a bit different, but you were in sales before, right? We're actually looking for sales staff right now. I meant well with my suggestion, but Alex visibly grimaced. I'd rather work somewhere I can earn more. I want to make Mom feel secure. Did he think I wasn't earning enough? I explained more about our company. Showing him job listings, I pointed out the salary and holidays, along with other benefits. Alex, who had been skeptically browsing the site, gradually warmed up to the idea. This might not be too bad after all. And so, he applied to a position at my company. Fortunately, we were looking to significantly expand our sales department, so Georgina was hired. Pressured somewhat by his parents, we registered our marriage. Who would have thought we'd end up working at the same company? Indeed. By the way, which department are you in? It seems Alex still thought of it as just the company I work for, not realizing I'm the owner. I hadn't kept it a secret on purpose, but it felt awkward to bring it up, and I hadn't mentioned it yet. This seemed like a good opportunity, so, with a nervous heart, I was about to reveal the truth. Actually, Alex cut me off with an unexpected remark. Well, it doesn't matter. I'll probably quit eventually anyway. Eh? Quit. What did he mean by that? A bad feeling washed over me. Alex glanced at me and laughed, a smile I hadn't seen before. It scared me. What? You got a problem? No, it's not a complaint, but what do you mean? I'm not planning to quit my job now. Oh, unless we have kids? But my company offers maternity and paternity leave. Kids are out of the question. We're already busy with Dad and Mom. Dad and Mom? As I tilted my head, Alex mimicked me mockingly. Yeah, my parents. Didn't I say they need care? Rosalind? I heard, but you said they've been doing well lately. That's why you re-entered the workforce, right? Even if they're doing well, they're still elderly, aren't they? Aren't you worried at all? Or what? As a wife, are you planning to shirk that responsibility? I couldn't grasp what Alex was trying to say, feeling bewildered. I needed to clear my head and sort things out. Alex was trying to push the responsibility of caregiving onto me. And from how he spoke, it seemed he eventually planned to have me quit my job to prioritize caregiving. I'm not saying you should quit right away. Having two incomes helps financially. For now, just come back to the family home with me on our days off. What is that supposed to mean? I wasn't completely unprepared for the caregiving conversation. I had intended to help out, and I had thought that I could be of assistance in the future. But I never imagined being expected to return to my in-laws' house every holiday, eventually being burdened with caregiving responsibilities. What surprised me most was Alex's attitude. Before marriage, he was positive and reliable, but he changed drastically as soon as we got married. Is this person really Alex? I didn't want to believe it. This isn't the person I wanted to marry. I wanted to escape from reality by closing my eyes tightly, but Alex's angry voice relentlessly broke through. Listen, you're my wife. Don't defy me. Got it? I was so shocked by the change that I couldn't agree or disagree. I wish I hadn't married at all if I knew this would happen. Regret filled my mind, and the word divorce quickly followed. Society might frown upon a divorce so soon after getting married. But that seemed less important than wasting time with someone unpleasant. I prepared the divorce papers right away. The issue was the reason for divorce and the in-laws. The reason for divorce could be managed somehow. If necessary, I could even involve a lawyer. But the in-laws were a bigger concern. As Alex declared, we started visiting his parents' house on our days off. I was reluctant to go because Alex treated me poorly. But his parents were overjoyed every time we visited. I'm sorry for making you come here on your day off. No, it's okay. Brittany, teary-eyed with joy, made it impossible for me to rudely decline their hospitality. Every visit, they prepared my favorite sweets, telling me how much they appreciated it. Though I disliked being controlled by Alex, seeing Brittany happy made it difficult to bring up divorce, and time passed. By 2 months into our marriage, Georgina and I had started visiting his family home separately. Our days off just didn't align anymore. Initially, I had forced myself to adjust to Alex's schedule. Meanwhile, I had kept it a secret that I was the president of the company. The Alex before our marriage might have been fine, but revealing this to the current Alex would only invite trouble. Although it would be easy to find out if he looked into it, luckily, Alex seemed oblivious. Alex was a source of concern both as a husband and as an employee, causing numerous problems at work. I wanted to resolve the issues at work quickly and get a divorce. But what about Brittany? Despite everything, I didn't want to upset them. Torn, I headed to my in-laws' house as usual. Lately, I had become accustomed to entering the house without waiting to be invited. Today, as always, I opened the door and took off my shoes. That's when I heard a familiar voice from the back. Undoubtedly, it was Alex's voice. He was supposed to work today, but perhaps his schedule had changed. Feeling awkward, I walked down the hall and was about to enter the living room when I overheard their conversation.
That person, she's not very considerate, is she? And her housekeeping is subpar. She's earnest, but couldn't you find someone better?
Indeed, it was Brittany's voice. However, the tone was so full of malice, unlike anything I had heard from her before. It sounded like something out of a movie, so spiteful and unlike the Brittany I knew. Yet, it was unmistakably Brittany's voice. Despite all the praise she had given me, the thought of the gentle Brittany saying such things tightened my chest. I didn't want to hear any more, but my legs felt too heavy to move.
Sorry, Mom. But, you know, she's tall, so she might be able to carry you if necessary. With a bit of training, she could become more useful. Well, for now, she's pleasant and financially supportive, so I suppose that's acceptable. We're hoping for potential, I guess.
Alex and Brittany were laughing carelessly as they spoke. As I listened, my heart pounded with the realization that they were talking about me. Georgina's constant complaints were one thing, but I was shocked to discover Brittany's hidden side. Brittany, who always seemed so grateful, who would lower their head in thanks repeatedly, making me feel almost guilty. We shared laughs over snacks and meals I had cooked. Regardless of Alex's intentions, I thought I had a good relationship with Brittany. I had hesitated on divorce partly because of Brittany. Yet, according to their conversation, I was merely a caregiving resource for Brittany as well. Brittany then added insult to injury with this remark.
For now, I'll keep praising her and egging her on. She looks so foolishly happy then. Alex, you should learn from me. A fool and his scissors are easily parted, as they say.
Hearing this, I left the house as if fleeing. After calming myself down a bit, I contacted Alex and his family.
I'm going to be busy for a while and won't be able to visit or contact you. I'll reach out again later.
Despite multiple calls from both Alex and his family, I ignored them all. Alex's angry messages were even recorded on the voicemail.
Do you think you can trouble Mom like this? Apologize to her in person right now. You don't have the right to refuse.
As if anyone would comply after being spoken to like that. Naturally, I ignored this too. At work, I made sure not to run into Alex and started staying at a hotel after hours. During this time, I methodically prepared for divorce. Then, one day when preparations were sufficiently in place, I was finally caught by Georgina, who had been lying in wait at the office.
Hey! Ren!
Upon spotting me, Georgina looked like he was about to grab me but restrained himself, likely due to the presence of others. I decided to move the conversation to an empty conference room to talk with Alex.
I've been looking for you. What do you think you're doing? How many times have I called you? Do you have any idea how much I've been searching for you?
Alex was clearly furious. His breath was heavy, and his eyes, bloodshot and glaring, seemed to curse me with every look. As soon as we entered the room, he approached me with heavy footsteps. Then, standing right in front of me, he aggressively grabbed my wrist.
Let go! I told you on the phone, didn't I? I'll contact you when I've calmed down. Is there anything more important to you than my dad and mom? Do you realize how lonely you've made them feel by not being there?
Lonely? They were talking behind my back, and yet he dares to complain. I trembled with anger. I wished I could shut him up right there and hurl at him the worst insults I could think of. But I was too agitated to articulate my thoughts properly, so all I could do was grit my teeth and glare at Alex. Taking advantage of my silence, Alex continued.
Poor them, right? Even now, they're hungry because there's no food at home. Forget work today. You should just go back home. Don't you dare tell me what to do with my work. You're not a child, and caregiving doesn't mean you can't move. It's about time you stopped being so dependent.
I shook off Alex's hand and yelled.
I have an important meeting later today. There's no way I can just take off. And if it's so important, you should take a day off and go yourself.
There was no need for me to sacrifice so much for such people. Throwing away important work for them? Alex probably never expected me to fight back. He staggered back, surprised.
You're talking back to me. A wife's place is too.
I've been thinking, your values are skewed.
What do you mean a wife's place? They're your parents, aren't they? Shouldn't you be taking care of them instead of pushing it onto someone else?
Indeed, Alex's work today was supposed to be just preparing documents and meetings in the office. The document preparation could be rescheduled, and the meetings could be rearranged if he asked others, without causing much inconvenience. If Brittany was so important, he should be the one to take time off. If he won't, it shows how little they matter to him. Yet he dares to blame and try to control me. Such a convenient mama's boy. Disgusting.
What? That's ridiculous. Why should I, the husband, have to bow my head and skip work just to clean up after my wife?
Clean up what exactly?
It's time to make things clear. Listen up. Taking care of my parents is your job as my wife. If you can't do that, you're worthless as a wife.
Alex launched into a tirade, puffing up his chest with rough breaths, as if trying to intimidate me. Was he trying to scare me? He seemed like some playground bully. Not scary at all. What even is the value of a wife? Why do I have to be evaluated? So, what exactly do you want from me?
I asked, my voice laced with a sigh.
Alex snorted derisively.
Taking care of Dad and Mom is all on you, my dear wife. If you oppose, I'll divorce you and sue for alimony, huh?
Could he seriously believe such an absurd demand would fly? I looked at Alex, utterly dumbfounded, but there he was, standing tall and proud, giving me a nasty smirk. He must think I'd comply with his demand after becoming attached to Brittany. Indeed, I had been accommodating to the in-laws, thinking it was for the best. Regardless of Alex, I thought those two were good people. But now, having seen Brittany's true colors, I couldn't care less, let alone feel any sympathy. I smiled back at Alex.
All right then. Let's get a divorce.
Huh? Alex sounded completely taken aback.
Do you even understand what you're saying?
Yes.
I can't be the wife you want. So, let's get a divorce, shall we? If you want to sue for alimony, go ahead. Whether you'll get it is another matter, though.
I pulled out the divorce papers from my bag and handed them to Georgina. I had been keeping them on hand ever since I considered divorce.
Are you serious? Do you realize what you're doing?
Yes. Please, sign them quickly. Alex froze, seemingly in disbelief. Seeing his hesitation, I said,
Oh, you're not divorcing? Just talk, then?
Which made him furiously scribble his signature on the papers. After reviewing the signed document, everything was in order. I immediately handed it over to my secretary to file. Well, we're strangers now. As I stated matter-of-factly, Alex spat out.
You'll regret this. Talking back to your husband, what a failure of a wife. Good riddance. Choosing your job over Dad and Mom. Unbelievable. Oh, my apologies for that. Exactly. Even if I lost my job, I'd prioritize Dad and Mom. I'm not heartless like you.
Alex said this with too much pride. Then why didn't he take time off now? Instead of pushing it onto me, he should just take a break and help out his parents. Blaming me while he just complains is just passing the buck. From now on, even if we see each other at work, don't talk to me. I should have chosen a different company. Alex's parting shot pushed me to my limit. Then you're fired. I believe it was the coldest voice I've ever used. Alex stopped in his tracks and turned around and puzzled. Huh? Dismissed? You're not my boss. Have you gone mad from the divorce shock? Alex laughed, perhaps thinking it was a joke. I sighed softly and fixed my gaze on Georgina. When our eyes met, Alex flinched, looking at me, anxiously, bracing for what was to come. I inhaled deeply and spoke calmly. The funny one is you. You don't even recognize the face of your own company's president?
Huh? No, that can't be.
Alex's mouth twitched as he pulled out his smartphone and started searching. As he stared at the screen, the color drained from his face. He must have finally realized who I was. You're the president of this company? Finally caught on, have you? Alex knelt down and bowed his head to me, his voice trembling pitifully. It's not like that, Ren. I didn't know. Not know? No, you chose not to know, didn't you? I never brought it up, but there were plenty of opportunities for him to find out. A simple search on his phone would have revealed my name, if not my photo. It was typical of Alex. He probably never had any interest. A man without particular concern for the content of his work, focusing solely on income and time off. That's why his work performance has always been subpar. To you, I was merely an afterthought, wasn't I? What you and your parents truly desired was a diligent, hardworking wife. Someone to take care of them, anyone would do, right? Alex, mouth agape, shook his head, his face turning a ghastly shade of pale. Not at all. Had I known you were the president, I would never have expected you to shoulder the caregiving. I would have taken care of Dad and Mom myself, allowing you to concentrate on your work. With sufficient funds, one could easily hire assistants. You'd have me earn while outsourcing caregiving to professionals, and you'd merely enjoy life, right? Alex, with a faint smile, whispered, I wouldn't do something so terrible. Indeed, had Alex navigated things more adeptly, such a future might have been attainable. Had he proposed this before I discovered his parents' true nature, I would have agreed without hesitation. I'll earn so you can dedicate yourself to caregiving. I believe he would have sincerely said that. If Alex and his parents not shown their true colors after marriage, such a future could have been plausible. He squandered that opportunity by his own doing. Alex looked up at me, eyes seemingly moist, with a plea. Please, Ren! Can't we start over? We had good times, didn't we? Let's visit all those places again. True, you always took me to places I never knew. Every place you took me was indeed fun. A glimmer of hope shone in Alex's face. Right? So, if that's the case. However, that was merely you donning a mask to get married. Life with you post-marriage was profoundly disappointing. That is. I wonder if the divorce papers have been processed by now. Well, I must prepare for a meeting. Regarding the dismissal, I'll contact you later. You may leave for today. I packed my belongings, waved flippantly at Alex, and reached for the door. But before I could open it, Alex grasped my left hand. Turning around, I faced Alex's glare. I glared back and simply asked, Anything else? Anything else? This isn't over. Suddenly deciding on a divorce, then revealing you're the president, and now a dismissal. I can't just accept this. It's all too arbitrary on your part. The divorce was initiated by you. You didn't expect me to agree to it. Moreover, you should have properly informed me that you were the president. It appears Alex had planned to use the divorce as leverage to control me. The revelation of my presidency must have been a shock to him. Blaming others and shirking responsibility onto his wife. Such actions are unbecoming of an adult. It's absurd that I had to set everything up for him, yet he never questioned it. He's always lived by blaming others. I'm at a loss for words from sheer disbelief. Alex is grinding his back teeth, seemingly regretting letting go of his financial support, but that's not my concern. Isn't that too self-serving? Blaming me for your lack of planning and ignorance isn't fair, I said, causing Alex's face to flush red as he yelled back in a strained voice. Coward! How can the president of such a large company justify firing an employee for personal gain? That's unacceptable. Such tyranny won't be tolerated. Alex postured as if he had the moral high ground. His thinking is too immature. Always believing he's in the right. Can he not comprehend what's been said? I couldn't help but hold my head in my hands. Seeing me like this, Alex, thinking he had won, smirked triumphantly. See? I hit the nail on the head. Should I bring this to light? You'd be the one in trouble. I'm astounded by your foolishness. If it comes out, you're the one who'll suffer. What are you talking about? I cut Alex off, listing names. General Affairs Hoyt, Sales Gracelyn, Winter, and Accounting's Paisley. Who else was there? When I asked Alex, he began sweating profusely and looking away. What? What are you talking about? You know very well. I just named female employees you've been persistently harassing. They've come to me seeking help. Most employees don't know Alex is my husband. Only my secretary is aware. Among them, I received complaints like, I'm troubled by the constant invitations from sales Alex. At first, I doubted my ears. My own husband was hitting on multiple young female employees. And despite their rejections, he kept coming back. I was mortified and apologetic beyond words. I was just trying to foster camaraderie among employees, Alex defended. By specifically targeting women over a decade younger than you? And inviting them to hotels? What kind of camaraderie were you trying to build? There were messages sent from Alex to these women, undeniable proof. No matter what Alex said, there was no escaping it. You're not only underperforming, but you're also a nuisance to others. It's my job as president to remove those who are detrimental to the company, isn't it? But that's right. And from accounting, there's a report that you might be fudging expenses. What about that? Surely, you wouldn't stoop so low, would you? Alex averted his eyes and fell silent. Regrettably, it seems that was true as well. A mama's boy, a womanizer, and on top of that, a miser. Moreover, to think he caused trouble not just for me but for others too, it's disappointing not just as a husband but as a person. I'm disillusioned by my lack of judgment in not seeing him for what he was. Feeling inept for not having seen through such a person. I'll make sure all suspicions are cleared up before proceeding with the dismissal, so rest assured. Well, I'm leaving now. You better get along with your parents back home. Alex collapsed on the spot. Slumped over, muttering something under his breath. He must have realized it was all too late. Even as I reached for the door, Alex, now devoid of energy, didn't say anything more, and I left the room. Upon further investigation, all suspicions against Alex were confirmed. After making Alex apologize to the affected female employees, he resigned voluntarily, taking responsibility. Now jobless, Alex returned to live with his parents at home. A while later, he attempted to start working again part-time, but then something unexpected happened to Alex. Until now, though former Rosalind needed care, former Brittany was essentially able to manage daily tasks on her own. Thanks to this, Alex only had to help out occasionally. However, former Brittany has recently started showing signs of dementia, including instances of wandering at night. A father who physically requires care and a mother who is usually fine but occasionally shows symptoms of dementia.
I just can't find peace anymore. We're running out of money too. Please help.
I received a plea for help from Alex, indicating he was at his limit. If our divorce had been amicable and there were no hard feelings towards my former in-laws, I might have been inclined to help. But these were the people who had looked down on me as nothing more than a caregiver. There's no room for sympathy.
It sounds tough, but I'm afraid I cannot offer any assistance. Furthermore, as we are now strangers, I kindly ask that you refrain from contacting me further. Depending on the situation, I may have to take appropriate actions.
After conveying this, I no longer received any messages from Alex. After divorcing Alex, I had decided I was done with marriage and resolved to live alone. However, just when I had settled on this, someone I had known for many years through work confessed his feelings to me. The trauma from Alex made me consider declining, but knowing this person's sincerity from our long acquaintance, I gratefully accepted the offer to start dating. Whether this will lead to marriage, I'm uncertain, and part of me doubts, fearing a change post-marriage, but this person is the most gentle individual I've ever met. Moreover, since he is also a business owner, we can share and understand each other's work. Unlike with Alex, he truly feels like a partner should. If I can spend the future with him, this happiness I feel now will surely continue. Hoping for such a future, I continue to work hard today. Michael's baby turned 1 month old, and a celebration was planned. I was invited to Regina's parents' home.
How adorable! Just like an angel.
The moment I reached out to the baby's tiny fist, Regina shouted,
"Don't touch the baby if you're a stranger."
I withdrew my hand in surprise and protested. "I'm Michael's mother. I'm the grandma of this child." "So?" Regina smiled mischievously.
"To me, you're a stranger. You're just someone unnecessary once I've gotten the congratulatory money."
"That's terrible."
"You're stingy, just like your deli. It doesn't seem like we'll need anything from you in the future. So, this is where our relationship ends. Don't show your gloomy face around us again. We don't want your poverty rubbing off on our family."
I was momentarily taken aback, but quickly responded with a smile.
"All right then."
Leaving me at the entrance, Regina went back inside. In my heart, I declared war. If that's the attitude you're going to take, I have my plans too. You'll regret this later. I am Margaret, a 55-year-old housewife. Shortly after my eldest son, Michael, started elementary school, I lost my husband. Determined to support Michael through college, I decided to work harder. I quit my part-time job and, using the money my husband had left, started a small delicatessen. Thanks to working tirelessly every day, the deli gradually became successful. And I was able to send Michael to college. When Michael was a child, I was too busy with daily life. We hardly ever had the luxury to go to theme parks or play in the park on weekends like other families. I felt guilty for not being able to give him more attention, fearing I was a failure as a parent. But Michael grew up to be a compassionate person, which relieved me. Michael, who landed a job at a big company, moved out to live on his own. Though he lived in the city, he would come to visit with a bright smile during long weekends. When he got used to his job, he called me one day saying, "There's someone I want you to meet," which excited me. However, I felt anxious as well as happy when Michael brought the young lady home. She was the daughter of the well-known Tucker Industries. I was nervous, thinking it was about making Michael a successor. But it turned out her cousin was set to take over and was already the vice president. Michael's wife, Regina, graduated from a university that only heiresses attend and is currently practicing to be a housewife at her parents' home. "Nice to meet you. Let's get along well, Margaret." The first time we met, she grabbed my hand and vigorously shook it. I could tell she was well-bred from her dining manners and behavior. But her unrestrained and flashy personality made me feel we wouldn't get along. But since Michael chose her, I wanted to get along well. I decided to make an effort to become closer. However, my feelings were quickly trampled upon after they got married. Regina was chatty and had a bright personality. That sounds nice, but her conversations revolved around neighborhood gossip, celebrity news, and speaking ill of acquaintances. The biggest issue was the timing of her visits. She would show up unannounced right when I got back from work and started preparing dinner. Naturally, I ended up inviting her to eat. I don't have any morning sickness at all. I can eat anything. Beer's okay too.
You shouldn't drink alcohol if you're pregnant. Really? Is that so?
Regina's surprised look made me anxious. When she told me she was pregnant, I was as happy as if it were my own news. But Regina seemed to lack awareness as a pregnant woman or had little prior knowledge. And despite claiming she could eat anything, her likes and dislikes were strong. She disliked fish for being too fishy and would only eat meat from certain brands. For dessert after dinner, she wanted expensive fruits like Japanese shine muscat grapes and muskmelons. Moreover, she had a habit of rating the meals after eating.
65 points. Not great.
93 points, could use more spice.
Today is 100 points. Amazing, you passed. Congratulations.
I forced a smile at her full-faced grin. "Regina, why do you rate every meal?" she said with a broad smile. "I'm doing you a favor, practicing. If you can't satisfy your daughter-in-law, your deli might as well shut down."
"I've been running it for 20 years in downtown, you know."
My sarcasm didn't land.
"It only takes a moment to go under. I wouldn't want to take care of an unemployed Margaret. So, you better work hard."
I'm only 55, yet she treats me like an old lady. Though she seems well-meaning, her constant superior attitude and offensive remarks are infuriating. Having these exchanges 4 or 5 times a week is exhausting. And using her pregnancy as an excuse, she won't even clear the table after eating, lounging on the sofa with her phone instead. She wouldn't budge, so when I tried to relax with a beer and TV, she complained.
"Margaret, that's terrible. Drinking in front of me, is this harassment? Go to your room. I just want to enjoy a drink while watching TV dramas."
"Why don't you watch on your mobile phone? You're so inconsiderate." "I want to watch on a big screen, not a tiny one. And why do I have to take this from my daughter-in-law?" When my irritation reached its peak, Regina packs up Michael's share of dinner, smiles, and leaves. Exhausted, I bathe early and head to bed. Casually asking how they manage weekend dinners, she unabashedly says they use delivery, deli items, or ready meals.
"I'm not good at housework. But I want Michael to eat delicious meals. It would really help if Margaret could prepare weekend dinners too."
I ignored her audacious request. "I'm happy Regina comes to visit, but I'm also tired from work." Maybe just once a week would be better? When I couldn't take it anymore and complained to Michael over the phone, this was his response.
Regina's morning sickness is really bad, and she can't do anything at home. I'm swamped with overtime, so I can only help out with the chores on weekends. She's lying down all the time at your place, right?
Having Mom watch over Regina makes me feel relieved. It's her first pregnancy, so she's probably anxious. Please overlook her rudeness.
All right, I understand.
It seems Regina plays the role of a frail pregnant woman in front of Michael. I strongly wanted to show him how she lies on the sofa, laughing while watching videos. But doing so would disappoint kind-hearted Michael and make him feel guilty towards me. Regina is taking advantage of me, knowing I wouldn't do such a thing. That part again irritates me. Though I'm not fond of Regina, I'm looking forward to meeting my grandchild and want to maintain a good relationship with Michael as before. So, I decided not to meddle too much and warmly watch over Michael and his family. I shouldn't impose my opinions on naming the grandchild or insist on living together because he's the eldest son. Instead, when Regina asked, I helped with buying baby supplies, accompanied her to prenatal checkups, and even to church to pray, serving as a dedicated bag carrier. As a grandma, I was eager to help in any way possible. But Regina's attitude grew increasingly overbearing. Lately, she even orders large furniture to be delivered to our home, right in front of me.
Margaret, what do you think of this? It's expensive.
Shall I buy it for you? Offering to buy it was my downfall. After that, she started asking for expensive baby items one after another.
Imported items are more stylish, right? It would be really nice to have a matching set. Regina, why not rent items that are only used for a short period? There are affordable and durable domestic brands too.
I couldn't help but suggest, and Regina glared at me sharply.
Margaret, don't you want to give your grandchild the best?
There's no end to luxury. So, you just don't want to spend the money, huh? Oh, how dreadful. Dad or Mom would easily shell out $100,000. I thought, why not ask your dad or mom then? But it seems she has no intention of relying on her parents.
Margaret, you can't take your money to the grave. Let's spend it generously without being stingy.
Her words were so rude that I was at a loss for words. I felt my face heat up with anger, and I almost yelled back, "Mind your own business." No, that's not right. Causing a scene would put Michael in a difficult position, which would be unfair to him. Struggling to control my anger, I tried to speak calmly. Anyway, let's use rental services for things we can. Savings have their limits.
All right, I understand.
Regina reluctantly agreed, though she seemed dissatisfied. My relief was short-lived when Michael called me in the evening.
Regina was asking Mom for various baby items? Yes, well.
Sorry. I thought she was buying them with the money I've been giving her. I was surprised when I saw the sudden increase in high-brand baby clothes and toys. I could tell Michael was confused over the phone.
Did she make you spend a lot? Should I pay you back?
No, it's fine. I was planning to buy her some things anyway. Really sorry. Regina wanted a girl, and when we found out at the hospital, she got carried away. I thought it was more than just getting carried away, but I refrained from speaking ill of Regina and stopped arguing. It's nice that it's a girl as she wanted.
Being a lady, she just has a different sense of money from us. But I don't think she means any harm. I'll tell her not to burden Mom anymore.
Please do. After hanging up, I sighed. I understand the desire to gather cute baby items. Still, it would be common sense to show a little restraint. After that, Michael must have talked to her because Regina stopped asking for expensive baby items altogether. I wished she would stop coming altogether, but Regina kept showing up as if nothing happened. Lately, she seemed to have shifted her strategy to asking for small amounts of money, thinking if not large sums, then small ones might work.
Look, I can't work because I'm pregnant, so I have no money. But I'm scared Michael will lose interest if I don't keep up appearances. It's okay for someone old like Margaret, but I'm young and want to be loved.
Of course, I had no intention of giving her a penny.
Why don't you ask Michael for more allowance? He'd listen, right?
I can't do that. It would sound like I'm blaming his salary. Regina pouted, snacking on some treats. Being a manager at a major company at 30, he earns more than most of his peers. But my dad earns more. Oh, sorry. The words "then ask your dad" almost slipped out, but I held back with all my might. Regina always carried a high-brand bag and wore well-tailored maternity wear. Wanting more despite getting a hefty allowance seemed too selfish. It's not that I think pregnant women shouldn't dress well or housewives should look shabby. But begging your mother-in-law for money is definitely wrong. Though I was upset, looking at Regina's swollen belly calmed my anger. Soon, I'll meet the baby. The thought of becoming a grandma soon tickles me. In that aspect, I'm thankful to Regina. When my sister-in-law, Chelsea, came over the weekend and I vented to her, she was outraged.
The worst daughter-in-law ever. She's taking advantage of you too much. Michael should speak up.
Do you think so? I smiled at Chelsea's indignation. But I think once the baby is born, her rude behavior towards me will get better.
It's not just maternity blues, it's her character. Don't get your hopes up.
Maybe. But I get along with Michael, and I don't want to ruin their marriage. Chelsea sighed in frustration.
Don't keep it all to yourself. I'm here to listen to your complaints anytime.
Thanks, Chelsea. I smiled at Chelsea. For now, let's just pray that the baby is born safely. Eventually, Regina gave birth without any issues. I wanted to meet the baby, but since she went straight to her parents' house after being discharged, I decided to wait until Regina was feeling better. Michael, stopping by Regina's parents' house after work, sends me pictures of the baby daily. I can only imagine how adorable the baby must be in person, and my anticipation grows. When the baby was about a month old, Michael contacted me. Regina wants to have a baby reveal party. A reveal party? Yeah, at her parents' house, inviting relatives. Can we invite our side too? Thomas and the others are on board. That sounds good. Why not invite the same group as we did for the wedding? I'll do that. Then, I'll start reaching out. My relatives all live in the same state. They love events, so they'd be happy to come. As expected, when I informed them of the date, they all wanted to come. On the day, I arrived a bit early with a gift for the baby, intending to greet Regina's parents first. I rang the doorbell of the grand house, surrounded by a high fence, and a mature woman's voice responded. The parents were often away for work, so a housekeeper was always there. The person who came to the door must have been her. As I reached the grand entrance along the slope, Regina, in a floral dress, greeted me at the foyer, holding the innocent baby in her arms. Dad and Mom got called into sudden work, so they're not back yet. Busy even on a Sunday. I greeted and was about to enter when Regina coldly asked, "The gift for the baby?"
Oh, yes, here.
Handing the baby to the waiting housekeeper, Regina watched as I searched my bag. She snatched the envelope as I pulled it out and opened it right there. Are we checking gifts in front of everyone? Ignoring my surprise, Regina pulled out the contents and frowned in displeasure.
$1,000? That's too little. I thought that was the going rate. At least $50,000 should be in there. Well, can't expect much from poor people.
As Regina put the gift back into the envelope, the housekeeper stood behind her, holding the baby, who yawned adorably. Drawn by the baby's cuteness, I approached the housekeeper.
How adorable, just like an angel.
As I reached out to the baby's tightly clenched little fist.
Don't touch the baby if you're a stranger.
Startled by the sudden shout, I pulled my hand back. As the baby began to cry, Regina commanded the housekeeper.
Take him to his room, now.
Yes. After the housekeeper took the baby away, I protested to Regina.
I am Michael's mother. I'm the grandma of this child.
So? Regina smirked mischievously.
To me, you're a stranger. You're just someone unnecessary once I've gotten the congratulatory money. That's terrible. You're stingy, just like your deli. It doesn't seem like we'll need anything from you in the future. So, this is where our relationship ends.
She fluttered her hand, shooing me away.
Thanks for your efforts. You can go home now. Don't ever show me that gloomy face again. We don't want your poverty rubbing off on our family.
I was momentarily shocked, but quickly responded with a smile.
All right then.
Leaving me at the entrance, Regina went back inside. Her words kept swirling in my head. This was the first time in my life I had been subjected to such a terrible humiliation. Why do I have to be spoken to like this by my daughter-in-law? Clenching my fists as if my bones would crush, I declared war in my heart. If that's the attitude you're going to take, I have my plans too. You'll regret this later. When I opened the front door, my relatives were crossing the garden, coming my way.
Huh? Margaret, are you leaving already?
Regina, who came out to greet them, smiled at the puzzled relatives.
Margaret has some errands to run.
Dinner is about to arrive. You could have stayed and eaten with us. She's in a hurry.
Welcome everyone. It seems Michael and his parents will be a little while longer. Please make yourselves comfortable in the meantime.
Regina ushered the relatives inside, closed the front door, and immediately locked it. Regina, who is good at putting on a facade, is popular with our relatives. At my husband's anniversary memorial, she went around pouring drinks for the older men, introducing herself. Despite being beautiful and wealthy, her cheerful and friendly demeanor left a very good impression. So, no one doubted Regina's words this time. I decided to resort to my last option. I headed somewhere. 2 hours later, I pressed Regina's family's doorbell again. In front of the relatives, Regina, who reluctantly let me in, whispered to me irritably.
Why did you come back?
I forgot something important.
Huh? Oh, you brought the rest of the congratulatory money. Such a small amount was indeed embarrassing.
Passing by the smirking Regina, I proceeded down the hall filled with lively voices. Opening the door, I found a spacious dining room where both families were gathered around a huge table. Although Regina's parents and Michael were nowhere to be seen, the table was laden with appetizers, and the relatives were happily sharing beer and wine.
Margaret, you came back. Come over here. We have bourbon and cocktails too. Why not have the housekeeper bring some?
I smiled at the beckoning relatives. Thank you, Trevor. But before that, I have something I'd like to reveal too.
Oh, what's that? A surprise gift?
To Regina's nonchalant question, I responded just as pleasantly.
Yes, a surprise. Now, everyone, please listen.
Clapping my hands, I silenced the chatter of the relatives and opened the voice recording app on my mobile phone, pressing play.
Don't touch the baby if you're a stranger.
Regina's shout echoed in the suddenly quiet room.
Is that Regina's voice?
The room buzzed with confusion.
Once you've given the congratulatory money, you're unnecessary. With your stingy delicatessen, we won't need anything from you in the future. So, this is where our relationship ends. Don't ever show that gloomy face again. We don't want your poverty rubbing off on our family.
No matter how many times I hear it, it's a terrible line. It seems I'm not the only one who thinks so, as the women in the family began to criticize Regina.
Even if a daughter-in-law and mother-in-law are traditionally at odds, this is too much. Margaret raised Michael alone while running the delicatessen, enduring so much. To belittle her like this is unforgivable. What's this? Just because her parents are wealthy, she acts so haughty. Such a nasty daughter-in-law.
Not just my relatives, but even Regina's family expressed their anger.
To say such things to your mother-in-law is unbelievable.
We're so sorry for our Regina. This is embarrassing for us too.
Being spoiled as a lady is one thing, but doesn't she know the difference between right and wrong? At her age, such lack of manners.
Faced with the cold stares of the relatives, Regina showed panic. Her cheeks twitching, she hurriedly tried to smooth things over.
Stop joking around, Margaret. Oh, I get it. You're jealous because Michael always defends me, so you made this up.
Regina covered her face with her hands and started to fake cry. I've tried so hard to get along with Margaret, and this is how she treats me? That's cruel. The women all had faces of disbelief. However, the men were easily deceived, looking confused and at each other.
Come on, that's too harsh. Yeah, ganging up on her. Poor thing, she started crying. Margaret, what's the meaning of this? Are you acting spitefully because Michael chose Regina? It's always the mother-in-law bullying the daughter-in-law, isn't it? Everyone knows Regina is a good girl. Don't pull such pranks, Margaret.
The men quickly sided with Regina, who must have been inwardly mocking them. Then the women exploded in anger.
Good girl? When we had a gathering at Margaret's, she refused to help in the kitchen, escaping to the dining area. Ignored calls for help, flirting with the men all the time. Right. When we were supposed to bring dishes for the meal, she lied about injuring her hand and brought store-bought items, then had the audacity to claim hers was the best.
Men are really weak against this type of girl. No eye for character. The dining room turned into a battleground of men versus women, mixing my relatives with Regina's. The once lively dining room was now filled with a tense atmosphere. As the housekeeper, flustered, brought in more beer, the doorbell rang. Chelsea entered the dining room, guided by the housekeeper. With a thick, bulging envelope of congratulatory money in her hand, catching Regina's eye. Chelsea, welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Here's the congratulatory money. Oh!
Chelsea deliberately let the envelope slip from her hand, scattering its contents across the table.
Oh dear, I forgot to seal it. Sorry about that. Huh? Who's that in the picture with Regina?
A relative picked up a photo, murmuring suspiciously. Regina turned around in shock. But before Regina could collect the photos, several relatives grabbed them, exclaiming in unison.
Whoa! This looks like evidence of an affair.
It was a sight one would want to look away from. Photos captured Regina being hugged by an unknown man, kissing as she got out of a car, and entering a hotel together. As the relatives were shocked, Regina hurriedly tried to explain.
It's not what it looks like. He's just an acquaintance. He loves physical affection. And the hotel, he said he felt sick, so I accompanied him inside.
Her excuses sounded incredibly feeble. Even the men who had defended Regina were now giving her cold looks. As if delivering the final blow, Chelsea turned on a voice recorder. And a conversation between Regina and the man played out.
Can't wait for my child to be born.
It's a hassle if your wife finds out, so let's just say it's Michael's and mine, okay? Shame, but we have no choice.
He's so dumb, thinking you're just a friend.
Hilarious.
We can get away with it since Michael and I have the same blood type from our college days.
What if the child looks just like you? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Their laughter ended the recording. Regina, pale-faced, turned to Chelsea.
Why do you have this? Oh, didn't I mention? I run a private investigation firm.
Chelsea smiled slightly.
Margaret asked me to look into you because of your reckless spending and suspicious behavior. And, as expected, it turned out to be an affair. I intended to keep this to myself to avoid ruining the marriage. But seeing no change in your attitude, Regina, I thought you deserved a punishment.
Regina glared at me with a venomous look.
So, it was your doing.
As Regina lunged at me, Chelsea quickly grabbed her arm, stepping in between. Shaking off Chelsea's grip, Regina threatened in a low voice.
Remember, keep quiet about this to Michael. It would be pitiful for the child to be abandoned by Dad right after being born. Everyone agrees, right?
Her self-serving logic was astounding, but Regina desperately sought agreement from the relatives.
Michael loves children, and if he remains unaware, he'll adore this child. So, let's keep this a secret, okay?
A deep, resonant voice froze everyone, including Regina and me. Looking towards the source, we saw Michael standing at the doorway. It seemed he had entered the house with Chelsea and had been eavesdropping from the hallway.
Michael.
Approaching Regina, Michael looked at her with disdain and angrily retorted.
We used to go out for drinks, the four of us, including his wife, before Regina got pregnant. I never imagined you two were meeting alone afterwards. Laughing at me, both of you. I'm sorry. Please, don't talk about divorce.
Regina pleaded with puppy eyes, but Michael shouted back.
Of course we're getting a divorce. Insulting not just me but also my mom, unforgivable.
Michael and Regina glared at each other for a while, but eventually, Regina was the first to back down.
Fine, we can get a divorce. But I'm keeping custody of the child. I've always wanted a child.
Even at this point, she insisted as if she had done nothing wrong. What an audacious woman. The relatives watched the exchange between Regina and Michael, tense. With clasped hands and a dreamy expression, Regina began to speak.
I think the child will look like me and be incredibly beautiful. Then I'll dress her in stylish clothes and take her everywhere. A young and beautiful me with a cute daughter. We could become famous as a beautiful mother-daughter duo. She's definitely going to be a model or actress someday. I'm so glad I had a daughter. Hey, children aren't accessories. Are you raising her just to show off? That's pitiful for the child. Being a single mother is tough. Do you understand what it entails to work and raise a child?
At my words, Regina laughed in a high-pitched tone.
Who do you think I am? I'm the daughter of Tucker Industries. Unlike your delicatessen, I have endless money. My dad and mom will help, and with housekeepers and babysitters, I won't have to care for the child.
I can live leisurely without working hard. After boasting, she twisted her lips into a sneer. Well, being from a single-parent family might be disadvantageous for school applications. So I plan to remarry someone suitable. Next time, not a company employee but a handsome CEO of an IT company. Such a man would let me have more freedom to play. Seems like it, Mr. Tucker. Chelsea called out, and Regina's parents appeared from the back door. Shocked and speechless, Chelsea explained to us. Actually, the Tuckers asked me to investigate Regina's behavior. They pretended to go to work today but stayed hidden, wanting to expose Regina's true nature. She had always worn a mask in front of her parents. The Tucker couple stepped into the center of the room and bowed deeply to us. Everyone, we apologize for the disturbance Regina has caused. We don't know how to make it up to Michael and Margaret. With a pained expression, they looked at Regina. Regina, now as pale as paper, was trembling. Thomas, Regina's father, sighed deeply and lamented in a low voice. To betray Margaret like this. I'm ashamed of my own daughter. But. Regina suddenly looked up at her father. Moving closer with tearful eyes and a sweet tone, starting to make excuses. I was bullied by Margaret. There's no proof, no images or recordings, but she said many mean things to me. It hurt, so I retaliated. Dad, you believe me, right? As I was about to argue, Regina's mother, Selena, sharply said, Lies! Margaret isn't like that. Selena turned to me and declared, As a fan of that shop, I can't accept what you've said. Take it back. What? Regina, wide-eyed, listened as Thomas explained. Selena and I are regulars at Margaret's Delicatessen. We often rely on it for business trips and dining with clients. For mom friends' home parties, we order delivery. That way, I only need to make desserts. The dishes with organic vegetables are famous for being healthy and delicious. I've known Margaret since before Michael's marriage, haven't I mentioned it before? Eh? Really? Regina, sweating profusely. She had likely been tuning it out. Selena, with a look of disgust, turned to Regina and said, We've overlooked your whims to some extent until now, but this time, your behavior towards Michael and Margaret is inexcusable. Exactly. Casually lying, demeaning others. After having an affair, you plan to raise another man's child as Michael's. That's the lowest of the low. Thomas glared at Regina with icy eyes and firmly declared, We're disowning you as of today. What? That's troubling. What am I supposed to do starting tomorrow? Figure it out yourself. You're 30, aren't you? How long do you plan to depend on others? Why don't you remarry him? He's the real dad, right? That's impossible. He said he wouldn't leave his wife. Oh no. I don't want to work. Regina let out a pitiful cry. Michael, I'm sorry. It was all my fault. Regina started to deeply apologize at mine and Michael's feet. Margaret, I'm sorry for everything. Please forgive me. Mom, let's go home. We should get our congratulatory money back. There's no obligation to pay it to a complete stranger. Yes, let's do that. I'll take mine back too. Me too, I've lost my appetite. Michael took the envelope from the black tray, and the other relatives followed suit. If it's not Michael's child, there's no need for a gift. Right, it's ridiculous. I thought it was a chance to make some pocket money by exploiting the baby. As Regina crumbled to her knees, the relatives, without a glance in her direction, left the meal and the celebration came to a miserable end. The room was left with scattered dishes, half-drunk beverages, and meals, marking the desolate conclusion of the reveal party. Unwilling to work, Regina cried and refused the divorce but was persuaded by the Tuckers to reluctantly sign. The compensation for the divorce lawsuit was fronted by her parents. Afterward, Regina was kicked out of her home. She moved into an apartment with moving and initial costs borrowed from her parents, starting to live alone. The Tuckers decided they couldn't leave the baby with Regina and chose to raise it themselves. They also demanded child support and recognition from the baby's father, who complied. Regina, who had lived a life of leisure, must be struggling with her first part-time job. After all, she has to pay back her parents for the moving expenses and compensation, in addition to her living costs. Regina, now deprived of the luxury to dress fashionably or enjoy leisure activities, seems to be working desperately every day, her hair disheveled. Though Michael and I have cut ties with Regina, our relationship with the Tucker couple continues. After the reveal party, the parents came to me with an apology gift. We were wrong in how we raised her. We're terribly sorry to both Michael and Margaret. Their tearful apologies eased some of my unresolved anger. Thankfully, they continue to frequent the delicatessen, which has thrived on word of mouth and has more customers now than it did 10 years ago. I'm currently busy preparing for the opening of a second location. Michael, too, seems to have regained his spirits and is diligently working. Both of us are living busy yet fulfilling lives. Someday, if fate allows and Michael has his own child, we plan to shower that child with endless love.